Hey there, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I've put together a new collection of interesting stories, so whether you're here to relax, fall asleep, or just listen in the background, this should be a good one. Feel free to let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, let's start with the first story. It is titled,
I decided to visit my wife at her job as a CEO. At the entrance, there was a sign that said authorized personnel only. When I told the guard I was the CEO's husband, he laughed and said, "Sir, I see your husband every day. There he is, coming out right now." So, I decided to play along. I never thought a simple surprise visit would shatter everything I believed about my 28-year marriage. My name is Gerald. I'm 56 years old. And until that Thursday afternoon in October, I thought I knew my wife Lauren better than anyone in the world. It started as such an innocent idea. Lauren had been working late again, pulling those 12 and 14-hour days that came with being CEO of Meridian Technologies. I'd been making dinner for one too many nights, eating alone while she texted me updates about board meetings and client emergencies. That morning, she'd rushed out without her usual coffee, and I thought bringing her favorite latte and homemade sandwich might brighten her day. The downtown office building gleamed in the autumn sunlight as I pulled into the visitor parking space. I'd only been to Lauren's office a handful of times over the years. She always said it was easier to keep work and home separate, and I respected that boundary. Maybe I respected too many boundaries. I walked through the glass doors carrying the coffee and brown bag, feeling oddly nervous. The lobby was all marble and chrome, the kind of intimidating corporate space that made me grateful for my quiet accounting practice. A security guard sat behind an imposing desk, his nameplate reading William. "Good afternoon," I said, approaching with what I hoped was a confident smile. "I'm here to see Lauren Hutchkins. I'm her husband, Gerald." William looked up from his computer screen, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to something I couldn't quite read. He tilted his head slightly, studying my face as if trying to solve a puzzle. "You said you're Mrs. Hutchkins's husband." His voice carried a note of confusion that made my stomach tighten. "Yes, that's right, Gerald Hutchkins. I brought her lunch." I held up the bag, suddenly feeling foolish. William's expression changed completely. His eyebrows shot up and then he did something that froze my blood. He laughed, not a polite chuckle, but a genuine bewildered laugh that echoed through the marble lobby. "Sir, I'm sorry, but I see Mrs. Hutchins' husband every day. He just left about 10 minutes ago." William gestured toward the elevators with casual certainty. "There he is now coming back." I turned, following his gaze, and watched a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit stride through the lobby. He was younger than me, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of confident bearing that seemed to own every room he entered. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. Everything about him screamed success and authority. The man nodded to William with familiar ease. "Afternoon, Bill. Lauren asked me to grab those files from the car." "No problem, Mr. Sterling. She's in her office." Frank Sterling. I knew that name from Lauren's work stories. Her vice president who joined the company 3 years ago, the man she occasionally mentioned in passing. Always in professional context. Frank this, Frank that, always business. My hands felt numb around the coffee cup. The brown bag crinkled as my grip tightened involuntarily. Everything in me wanted to speak up, to correct this massive misunderstanding, but my voice had completely abandoned me. William was looking between Frank and me now, genuine confusion creasing his features. "I'm sorry, sir, but are you sure you're Mrs. Hutchkins' husband? Because Mr. Sterling here is married to her." The words hit me like physical blows. Married to her. Present tense, not was married, not claims to be married, but a simple matter-of-fact statement that shattered my reality. Frank paused mid-stride, his attention drawn to our conversation. When his eyes met mine, I saw something flicker across his face. Not guilt, not surprise, but recognition. He knew exactly who I was. "Is there a problem here?" Frank's voice was smooth, controlled, the voice of a man accustomed to managing difficult situations. Something cold and calculating passed through my mind in that moment. Every instinct screamed at me to explode, to demand answers, to create the scene the situation deserved, but a deeper wisdom, born from 28 years of reading people in situations in my accounting practice, told me to play along. "Oh, you must be Frank," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Lawrence mentioned you." "I'm Gerald, a friend of the family." The lie tasted bitter, but it bought me time to think. I was just dropping off some documents for Lauren. Frank's shoulders relaxed slightly, but his eyes remained watchful. "Ah, yes. Lawrence mentioned you, too." "Had she? What had she said?" She's in meetings most of the afternoon, but I can make sure she gets whatever you brought. I handed over the coffee and sandwich. My movements is mechanical. Just tell her Gerald stopped by. Of course. Frank's smile was perfectly professional, perfectly normal, as if we hadn't just had the most surreal conversation of my life. I walked back to my car in a daze, my legs moving without conscious direction. The October air felt sharp against my skin, but I barely noticed. Everything looked the same as when I'd arrived 30 minutes ago, but my world had fundamentally shifted. Sitting in the driver's seat, I stared at the office building through my windshield. 28 years of marriage. 28 years of sharing a bed, a home, dreams, fears, inside jokes that nobody else understood. 28 years of believing I knew this woman completely. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. Running late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. Love you. The words that had once brought me comfort now felt like another lie in what was apparently a web of deception I'd been blind to. How long had this been going on? How many times had Frank been introduced as her husband while I sat at home making dinner for one, believing her stories about late meetings and business dinners? I started the car and drove home through familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. Our house looked the same. The red brick colonial we'd bought when Lauren first made partner at her previous firm. The garden she'd insisted on planting our second year there. The mailbox with both our names printed in careful script. Everything exactly as I'd left it, except now I knew it was all built on lies. Inside the silence felt different. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of a home waiting for its occupants to return. It was the hollow emptiness of a stage set. A carefully constructed facade. I walked through rooms filled with our shared memories, vacation photos, wedding pictures, the ceramic bowl Lauren had made in that pottery class she'd taken 5 years ago. Had any of it been real? I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. My mind kept replaying the scene at the office, searching for clues I'd missed, explanations that might make sense of what I'd witnessed. But there was only one explanation that fit, and it was one I wasn't ready to accept. The front door opened at 9:30, just as it had countless times before. Lauren's heels clicked against the hardwood floor, her keys jangled as she set them on the hall table. Normal sounds of a normal evening, except nothing was normal anymore. Gerald, I'm home. Her voice carried the tired warmth I'd grown accustomed to over the years. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking every inch the successful CEO in her tailored navy suit, her blonde hair still perfectly arranged despite her long day. How was your day? I asked, the question automatic. She sighed, loosening her jacket. Exhausting. Back-to-back meetings all afternoon. Did you eat already? I nodded, studying her face for any sign of deception, any hint that she knew about my visit to her office. There was nothing. Her expression was exactly what it had always been. Tired, distracted, but genuinely glad to see me. I brought you coffee today, I said carefully. To your office. Lauren paused in the middle of reaching for a glass. For just a fraction of a second, something shifted in her expression. Then she smiled. You did? I didn't get any coffee. I gave it to Frank to pass along. Another pause, so brief I might have imagined it. Oh, Frank mentioned someone stopped by. I had back-to-back meetings all afternoon, so I probably missed it. She moved to the refrigerator, her back to me. That was sweet of you to think of me. I watched her pour herself a glass of wine, noting how her hands remained perfectly steady. Either she was telling the truth or she was the most accomplished liar I'd ever met. After 28 years of marriage, I was terrified to discover which one it was. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal pantomime of normally. We watched the news together, discussed our weekend plans, went through the same bedtime routine we'd followed for decades. But underneath it all, a terrible new awareness pulsed like a second heartbeat. As Lauren slept beside me, her breathing deep and peaceful, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how many other lies I'd been living with. How many times had she come home from spending the day being Frank's wife, only to slip seamlessly back into being mine? How long had I been sharing my life with someone who was living a completely different one when I wasn't around? The numbers man in me started calculating. 3 years since Frank joined the company. How many late nights? How many business trips? How many times had she mentioned his name in passing, conditioning me to accept his presence in her professional life while he was actually inhabiting something much more personal? But the questions that haunted me most weren't about timelines or evidence. They were simpler and infinitely more devastating. Who was the woman sleeping next to me? And who had I been married to all these years? The next morning arrived with cruel normalcy. Lauren kissed my cheek before leaving for work. The same quick peck she'd given me for years. She wore her favorite perfume, the one I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. Everything about her was familiar, comforting, Exactly as it had always been, except now I knew I was kissing a stranger. I called my office and told my assistant I'd be working from home. For the first time in my 15-year practice, I couldn't bear the thought of discussing tax returns and quarterly reports. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that grew cold while I stared at Lauren's coffee mug in the sink. She'd used it that morning, just like always. Had she been thinking about Frank while she drank from it? By noon, I found myself doing something I'd never done before, going through Lauren's things, not frantically, not desperately, but with the methodical precision that had made me successful in accounting. I started with the obvious places: her home office, the desk where she sometimes worked in the evenings. The drawers revealed nothing suspicious. Work papers, company letterhead, business cards from clients I recognized from her stories. Everything was exactly what it should be for a CEO who occasionally brought work home. But then I found something that made my stomach clench. A restaurant receipt from Chat Lauron, the French place downtown where we'd celebrated our anniversary 3 years running, dated 6 weeks ago for 2 people. $68.50. I remembered that night clearly because Lauren had told me she was having dinner with a potential client, a female client from Portland who was in town for just one evening. I stared at the receipt, my hands trembling slightly. The timestamp showed 8:15 p.m. We talked on the phone that night around 9:30. She'd sounded relaxed, happy, describing her challenging but productive client meeting. I'd been proud of her for landing what she described as a significant account. But this wasn't a business dinner receipt. No alcohol charges that would accompany client entertainment. No appetizers or desserts that Lauren would order to impress a potential client. Just 2 entrees and a bottle of wine. The kind of intimate dinner I thought was reserved for us. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Lauren's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, honey." I answered, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. "Hey, I just wanted to check in. You sounded a little off this morning." Her voice carried genuine concern, the kind of caring attention that had made me fall in love with her 29 years ago. "Just tired," I said. "Didn't sleep well. Maybe you should take a real break today. You've been working so hard lately." The irony of her suggestion wasn't lost on me. While I'd been working hard at my small practice, she'd apparently been working hard at maintaining 2 separate lives. "Actually, I was thinking about that dinner you had with the client from Portland. The one about 6 weeks ago. How did that work out?" A pause. So brief that most people wouldn't notice it. But after 28 years of marriage, I knew Lauren's speech patterns. She was calculating. Oh, that it didn't pan out the way we'd hoped. She decided to go with a local firm. Her voice remained steady, casual. "Why, do you ask?" "Just curious. You seemed excited about it at the time." "Well, you win some, you lose some." I could hear typing in the background. She was probably answering emails while talking to me, multitasking the way she always did. I should get back to this board meeting prep. "See you tonight." "See you tonight." After she hung up, I sat staring at the receipt. Either she was lying about the client meeting or she was lying about the dinner. Either way, she was lying. I spent the rest of the afternoon like a detective in my own life, examining familiar things with new eyes. The credit card statements I'd always glanced at casually, trusting Lauren to handle our finances since she made 3 times what I did. Now I studied them line by line. Lunch charges on days when she told me she was brown bagging it to save money. Gas station purchases in neighborhoods across town, far from her usual routes. A charge at Barnes & Noble for $3,712 on a Tuesday afternoon when she'd supposedly been in back-to-back meetings. Lauren hadn't bought a book for pleasure reading in years, claiming she was too tired after work to focus on anything but trade magazines. But the most damning discovery came from her laptop. She'd left it open on the kitchen counter, something she'd been doing more frequently over the past year. I told myself I was just closing it to save battery, but my eyes caught a notification bubble in the corner of the screen. Frank Sterling had sent her a calendar invitation. I shouldn't have clicked on it. I knew I was crossing a line, violating her privacy in a way that would have horrified me just 24 hours earlier. But 24 hours earlier, I believed my wife was faithful. The calendar invitation was for dinner. Tonight, 7:00 p.m. at Bellecourt, the Italian place that had become our special occasion restaurant, the place where Frank had proposed to me 17 years ago. The reservation was under Frank's name. My chest felt tight as I scrolled through more calendar entries. Lunch meetings with Frank that weren't labeled as business. Doctor's appointments that Lauren had never mentioned to me. A weekend spa retreat 3 months ago that she'd told me was a women's conference for female executives. But the entries that made me physically nauseous were the recurring ones. Coffee with F every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Dinner plans every other Thursday. Weekend planning marked for this coming Saturday when Lauren had told me she needed to work. I was looking at a parallel life, meticulously scheduled and carefully hidden. Frank wasn't just her work colleague or even her affair partner. Based on these calendar entries, he was her primary relationship. I was the side note, the obligation, the inconvenience worked around. The garage door rumbled open at 6:15. Lauren was home early, unusual for a Thursday. I closed the laptop quickly, my heart hammering as I heard her heels on the kitchen tile. "You're home early," I said, hoping my voice sounded normal. She looked beautiful, I realized with a sharp pang. She'd refreshed her makeup. Her hair was perfectly styled, and she was wearing the black dress I'd bought her for her birthday last year. The dress, she'd said, was too fancy for everyday wear. I managed to wrap up early for once. She moved past me to the refrigerator, her perfume trailing behind her. "I thought maybe we could grab dinner out tonight. It's been forever since we did anything spontaneous." The lie was so smooth, so perfectly delivered that I almost believed it myself. If I hadn't seen the calendar invitation, I would have been thrilled by her suggestion. I would have rushed to change clothes, grateful for this unexpected attention from my successful, busy wife. "Where did you have in mind?" I asked. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe that new sushi place on 5th Street, or we could try something completely different." She was checking her phone as she spoke, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. I watched her type, wondering if she was texting Frank. Was she canceling their dinner, rescheduling? Or was this part of some elaborate game I couldn't even begin to understand? "Actually," she said, looking up from her phone with apparent disappointment, "I just remembered I have that conference call with the Tokyo office. It totally slipped my mind." She shook her head woefully. "Rain check." "Of course." The words came out automatically, but inside something cold and hard was crystallizing. "What time is your call?" 7:30. "Could run until 9 or 10. You know how these international things go." She was already moving toward the stairs, toward our bedroom where she kept her work clothes. "I'll probably just grab something quick on my way back to the office." I nodded, playing my part in this elaborate deception. "I'll make myself something here." She paused at the bottom of the stairs, looking back at me with what appeared to be genuine affection. "You're so understanding, Gerald. I don't know what I'd do without you." The words that should have warmed my heart instead felt like ice picks. How many times had she said variations of this while preparing to spend the evening with another man? How many times had I smiled and kissed her goodbye, unknowingly sending her off to her real life? I watched her climb the stairs, listening to her movements in our bedroom. She was changing out of the black dress, probably into something more businesslike for her conference call. Or maybe into something entirely different for her dinner with Frank. 20 minutes later, she came back down wearing a navy blouse and dark slacks, professional, but attractive. Her makeup was perfect, her hair touched up. She looked like a woman preparing for an important evening, not someone settling in for a long phone conference. "I'll try not to be too late," she said, kissing my cheek. The same spot she'd kissed that morning, but now it felt like a betrayal instead of intimacy. "Take your time. I'll probably turn in early anyway." She gathered her purse, her laptop bag, her keys. The same routine I'd watched thousands of times. But now I knew I was watching an actress preparing to leave one performance for another. The house felt different after she left. Not empty, but haunted. Every familiar object seemed to mock me with its false comfort. The wedding photos on the mantle, the vacation souvenirs on the bookshelf, the coffee table we'd picked out together 10 years ago when we'd redecorated the living room. All of it was real, but none of it meant what I'd thought it meant. I made myself a sandwich and sat in front of the television, but I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept circling back to the same impossible questions. How long had this been going on? How had I missed the signs for so long? And most devastatingly, had our entire marriage been a lie, or had something changed along the way? At 8:30, I found myself driving past Bellecourt. I told myself I was just going to the grocery store, that this route was perfectly normal. But when I saw Lauren's silver BMW in the restaurant parking lot, parked next to a dark Mercedes I assumed belonged to Frank, the last thread of hope I'd been clinging to snapped. They were in there right now, sharing the same kind of intimate dinner I thought was exclusive to our marriage. Was he telling her he loved her? Was she laughing at his jokes the way she used to laugh at mine? Were they planning a future that didn't include me? I drove home in a daze. The weight of my new reality settling around me like a heavy coat. My wife of 28 years was living a double life so complete, so seamlessly integrated that I'd been completely blind to it. The woman I'd thought I knew better than anyone was a stranger. The marriage I'd believed was solid was apparently just the cover story for her real relationship. But perhaps the most shattering realization was this. I had no idea how long I'd been living this lie, and I had no idea what to do about it. The revelation came 3 days later in the most mundane way possible. I was cleaning out the junk drawer in the kitchen, something I did quarterly to keep our household organized, when my fingers closed around a key I didn't recognize. It was brass worn smooth at the edges attached to a keychain from Harbor View Apartments across town. I stared at it for a long moment, my mind trying to process what I was seeing. We owned our house outright had for the past 8 years. Neither of us had any reason to have an apartment key, let alone one from a complex 30 minutes away from our neighborhood. That afternoon, while Lauren was at what she'd called a client presentation, I drove to Harborview Apartments. The complex was nice, upscale, but not ostentatious, the kind of place where successful professionals might keep a discreet second residence. I sat in my car in the visitor parking area, staring at the key in my palm and wondering if I really wanted to know what door it opened. The answer came when I saw Frank's Mercedes pull into a numbered space. I watched him get out carrying a grocery bag and what looked like dry cleaning. He moved with the easy familiarity of someone coming home, not someone visiting. When he disappeared into Building C, I waited exactly 10 minutes before following. The key fit perfectly into apartment 214. The door opened onto a life I never knew existed. It wasn't a temporary hiding place or a secret meeting spot. It was a home, a fully furnished, Livadine home with photos on the mantle, books on the shelves, and Lauren's favorite throw pillows arranged on a couch I'd never seen before. But it was the photos that destroyed me completely. Lauren and Frank at what looked like a company Christmas party, his arm around her waist in a possessive, intimate way. The two of them on a beach I didn't recognize. Both tanned and relaxed. Lauren wearing a sundress I'd never seen. Frank kissing her cheek while she laughed. Her left hand visible and notably bare of the wedding ring she wore at home. I moved through the apartment like a ghost, cataloging evidence of a relationship that was clearly far more than an affair. This was a second life, complete and established. In the bedroom, Lauren's clothes hung next to Frank's in a shared closet. Her perfume sat on the dresser next to his cologne. The bathroom held 2 toothbrushes, her contact solution, the expensive face cream she claimed was too costly to repurchase when she'd run out 6 months ago. On the kitchen counter, I found the most devastating evidence of all. A folder labeled Future Plans in Lauren's handwriting. Inside were house listings in Frank's name, vacation brochures for trips I'd never heard her mention, and a business plan for expanding Meridian Technologies with Frank listed as CEO and Lauren as president. But at the bottom of the folder was something that made my hands shake. A consultation summary from Morrison & Associates Family Law. The letterhead was familiar because Morrison & Associates was the firm that had handled our will updates 5 years ago. According to the summary, Lauren had met with them twice in the past 4 months to discuss optimal divorce strategies for high-asset individuals. The document outlined her approach in clinical detail. She planned to file for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and emotional abandonment. The strategy involved establishing a pattern of my alleged emotional unavailability supported by what the lawyer called lifestyle incompatibility evidence. According to this plan, my preference for quiet evenings at home would be presented as social isolation. My satisfaction with my small accounting practice would become lack of ambition. My contentment with our modest lifestyle would be reframed as inability to support her professional growth. But the most chilling part was the timeline. Lauren had been planning this divorce for at least 2 years, carefully documenting instances of what she called my withdrawn behavior. She'd been creating a narrative of our marriage that painted me as an inadequate husband who'd gradually become emotionally unavailable. The woman I'd been living with, loving, trusting, had been systematically building a case against me while I remained completely oblivious. I sat on their couch, surrounded by evidence of their shared life, and tried to process the magnitude of the deception. This wasn't just an affair that had gotten out of hand. This was a calculated replacement of one life with another. Frank hadn't just stolen my wife. He'd systematically assumed my role while I was gradually being written out of the story. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. Running late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. Love you. The same words she'd probably texted me from this very apartment. Maybe while Frank was cooking dinner in their kitchen or while they were planning their next vacation together. How many times had she sent me loving messages while actively living a completely different life? I photographed everything with my phone, my accountant's mind automatically creating the documentation I'd need later, the photos, the legal documents, the evidence of their shared residence. But as I worked, a strange calm settled over me. For 3 days, I'd been tormented by uncertainty, by the gap between what I knew and what I suspected. Now I had answers. And while they were devastating, they were also clarifying. Lauren hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been conducting an elaborate long-term plan to transition from one life to another with me as the unwitting supporting character in my own replacement. The woman I'd been married to for 28 years had spent the last several years methodically erasing me from her future while maintaining the facade of our marriage. When I got home, I found Lauren's laptop open on the kitchen counter again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I opened her email and found correspondence that confirmed everything I'd discovered at the apartment. Messages between Lauren and Frank discussing when to make the transition. Communications with her lawyer about preparing Gerald for the inevitable changes. Even emails to our mutual friends, subtly preparing them for what she called some difficult decisions I'll need to make about my marriage. One email to her sister Sarah, dated just 2 weeks ago, was particularly devastating. Gerald's been so distant lately. I think he's going through some kind of midlife crisis, but he won't talk about it. I'm trying to be patient, but I can't sacrifice my own happiness indefinitely. Frank thinks I should consider all my options. Reading this, I realized that Lauren hadn't just been living a double life. She'd been actively rewriting our marriage history to justify her planned exit. Every quiet evening I'd spent reading while she worked on her laptop. Every time I'd encouraged her to pursue her career ambitions, even when it meant less time together, every instance of my being supportive rather than demanding, had been transformed into evidence of my inadequacy as a husband. The cruelest part was recognizing how she'd manipulated my own responses to support her narrative. When she'd started working later and traveling more, I'd been understanding. When she'd seemed stressed and distant, I'd given her space. When she'd suggested we needed better communication, I'd agreed to couples counseling, never realizing I was providing her with material to use against me later. That night, Lauren came home at nearly 11 o'clock, apologizing for her late evening with client entertainment. She kissed my cheek and asked about my day, the same routine we'd followed for years. But now I could see it for what it was. A performance designed to maintain the status quo until she was ready to execute her exit strategy. "How was the client dinner?" I asked, testing her reaction. "Productive, I think. We're trying to land this big contract, and sometimes these things require extra relationship building." She moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, making herself a cup of tea. Frank was there, too, of course, since he'll be managing the account if we get it. Frank was there, too. Of course, he was. I wondered if they'd laughed about this conversation later in their shared apartment while planning their shared future. "That's good," I said. "You and Frank work well together." Lauren paused, cup halfway to her lips. "We do. He really understands the business side of things." There was something in her voice, a warmth that she used to reserve for talking about me. "He's been instrumental in some of our biggest wins lately." I nodded, playing my part in this elaborate charade. But inside, I was calculating. How long did I have before she filed for divorce? How much more evidence did she need to gather to support her strategy? How many more times would I kiss her goodnight while she planned my replacement? As I lay in bed that night, listening to Lauren's peaceful breathing beside me, I realized that the woman I'd been married to for 28 years was essentially gone. In her place was someone who could maintain this level of deception with apparent ease, someone who could plan my emotional and financial destruction while accepting my love and support. But perhaps most devastating of all was the recognition that I'd been living with a stranger for months, possibly years, without ever suspecting it. The Lauren I thought I knew, the woman I'd built my life around, had been gradually replaced by someone capable of this level of calculated betrayal. The question now wasn't whether my marriage was over. The question was whether it had ever really existed at all. I chose Saturday morning for the confrontation. Lauren was in our kitchen wearing the pale yellow robe I'd bought her 3 Christmases ago, sipping coffee from her favorite mug while scrolling through her phone. It was the kind of peaceful domestic scene that had once filled me with contentment. Now it felt like watching a performance I could no longer pretend to believe. "We need to talk," I said, setting the folder of evidence on the kitchen table between us. Lauren looked up from her phone, her expression shifting from casual attention to sharp awareness as she saw the documents. Her coffee mug paused halfway to her lips, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face that might have been relief. "What's this about?" she asked, but her voice lacked the confusion it should have carried. She knew exactly what this was about. "I went to your apartment yesterday, the one at Harbor View." I sat down across from her, noting how her shoulders straightened, how her breathing shifted to something more controlled. "I used the key from our junk drawer." Lauren set down her mug with deliberate precision. When she looked at me again, the mask was gone. The loving wife, the concerned partner, the woman who'd been apologizing for late nights and long meetings had disappeared. In her place sat someone I barely recognized, someone whose eyes held a coldness I'd never seen before. "I see." Her voice was calm, matter of fact. "How much do you know?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Not denial, not confusion, not even anger. Just a practical inquiry about the extent of my discovery. As if we were discussing a business problem that needed to be managed. Everything, I said. The apartment Frank, the divorce planning, the legal strategy, all of it. Lauren nodded slowly, her fingers drumming against the table in a rhythm I recognized from her board meetings. She was calculating, processing, deciding how to handle this unexpected development in her carefully orchestrated plan. How long have you known? She asked. On since Thursday, when I visited your office and the security guard told me he saw your husband every day. I leaned forward, studying her face for any sign of the woman I'd thought I'd married. He meant Frank. Something that might have been amusement passed across Lauren's features. Poor William. He's always been a bit too chatty. She reached for her coffee again, her movements unhurried. I suppose this complicates things. Complicates things. I could hear my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Lauren, we've been married for 28 years. You've been living with another man, planning to divorce me, and all you can say is that this complicates things, she sighed, a sound of mild irritation rather than distress. Gerald, let's less than not be dramatic about this. We both know this marriage has been over for years. We both know. I stared at her, searching for any trace of the woman who'd kissed me goodbye every morning, who'd said she loved me just 3 days ago. I didn't know anything. I thought we were happy. Lauren's laugh was short and utterly without humor. Happy? Gerald, when was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you showed any interest in my career, my goals, anything beyond your little accounting practice and your quiet evenings at home? I've always supported your career. I've always been proud of what you've accomplished. You've been passive, she corrected, her voice taking on the sharp edge I'd heard her use with underperforming employees. You've been content to let me carry the financial burden, the social obligations, the responsibility for actually building a life worth living. You've been perfectly happy to coast along in your comfortable little routine while I've been growing, changing, becoming someone who needs more than you've ever been willing to offer. Each word felt like a carefully aimed dart, hitting targets I didn't even know were vulnerable. If you felt that way, why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you tell me what you needed? I tried, Gerald. God knows I tried. But every time I brought up traveling more, expanding your practice, moving to a better neighborhood, you found excuses. You were always perfectly satisfied with exactly what we had, no matter how much I outgrew it. I thought about our conversations over the years, trying to remember these attempts at communication she was describing. There had been discussions about travel that I'd thought were casual daydreaming, suggestions about moving that I'd assumed were just idle speculation, comments about my practice that I'd interpreted as gentle teasing rather than serious criticism. So, you decided to replace me instead of work with me. Lauren's expression softened slightly, but not with affection. It was the kind of gentle patience she might show a slow student. I didn't set out to replace you. I met Frank 3 years ago when he joined the company. He was everything. You're not ambitious, dynamic, interested in building something bigger than himself. At first, it was just professional respect. Then, it became friendship. Then it became more. When? The question came out as barely a whisper. When? What? When did it become more? She considered this, tilting her head as if trying to recall the details of a business transaction. About 2 years ago. Frank had just closed his first major deal with us. We went out to celebrate, and we ended up talking until 3 o'clock in the morning about our dreams, our plans, the kind of life we wanted to build. It was the most stimulating conversation I'd had in years. You came home that night. I remember you said the client dinner ran late. It did in a way. Lauren's voice was matter of fact, as if she were describing something that had happened to someone else. That's when I realized what I'd been missing. Frank listens when I talk about expanding the company internationally. He gets excited about the same opportunities that excite me. He wants to build an empire, not just maintain a comfortable existence. And that justified lying to me for 2 years. For the first time, Lauren showed a flash of real emotion. But it wasn't guilt or sadness. It was irritation. I wasn't lying, Gerald. I was protecting you from a reality you weren't ready to face. Our marriage was already over. You just didn't want to see it. Our marriage was over because you decided it was over. Because you found someone who matched your ambitions better than I did. Our marriage was over because you stopped growing. Lauren stood up, moving to the window with the fluid grace that had first attracted me to her nearly 30 years ago. I kept hoping you'd develop some passion for something, anything beyond your routine. But you never did. You've been the same man at 56 that you were at 36, and I'm not the same woman. I stared at her profile against the morning light, recognizing the truth in her words, even as they devastated me. I had been content with our life in ways that she apparently never was. I had found fulfillment in our quiet evenings, our modest successes, our stable routine. While she'd been dreaming of bigger things, I'd been grateful for what we had. So, you and Frank have been planning to get rid of me. Lauren turned back to me, her expression businesslike. We've been planning our future. The divorce was always going to be necessary, but we wanted to handle it in a way that would be least disruptive to everyone involved. Least disruptive. I pulled out the legal consultation summary. You've been building a case against me for months. Emotional abandonment, lifestyle incompatibility. You've been documenting everything I do to use against me later. She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. The legal advice was to protect both of us. Divorce can get ugly if people aren't prepared. Protect both of us. Lauren, you've been systematically destroying my reputation with our friends, making me look like an inadequate husband who drove you to seek happiness elsewhere. I've been honest about the state of our marriage, she said defensively. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. The circular logic was dizzying. She'd been unfaithful, deceptive, and manipulative. But somehow I was the one being asked to examine my behavior. It was a level of psychological manipulation that left me feeling unmanned, questioning my own perceptions. Do you love him? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Lauren's expression softened for the first time during our conversation, but not in a way that offered me any comfort. I do. I love Frank in a way I never loved you. He challenges me, inspires me, makes me want to be better than I am. With him, I feel like I'm living instead of just existing. And with me, she looked at me for a long moment. Her gaze neither cruel nor kind, just honest. With you, I felt safe, comfortable, unchallenged. For a long time, I thought that was enough. But it isn't, Gerald. I want more than safe. I sat in silence, absorbing the weight of her words. 28 years of marriage, and what she'd valued most about me was my ability to provide emotional safety and comfort. What I'd seen as love and partnership, she'd experienced as stagnation and limitation. What happens now? I asked. Lauren sat back down, her posture relaxing as we moved into practical territory. Now we handle this like adults. I was going to file for divorce next month anyway. This just accelerates the timeline. Next month? Frank and I want to be married by Christmas. We've been planning a small ceremony, just immediate family. She paused, perhaps recognizing how this sounded. I was hoping we could make this transition as smooth as possible for everyone. Everyone except me. Gerald, you'll be fine. You have your practice, your routines, your simple pleasures. You'll probably be happier without the pressure of trying to keep up with someone like me. The condescension in her voice was breathtaking. Even in the midst of revealing her complete betrayal, she was positioning herself as the one doing me a favor by leaving. As if my contentment with our life had been a burden she'd been generously carrying all these years. I trusted you, I said quietly. I know you did. And I'm sorry it had to end this way. But Gerald, we both deserve to be with someone who truly understands us. You deserve someone who appreciates your quiet strengths, and I deserve someone who shares my ambitions. She was rewriting our entire marriage as a mutual mismatch rather than a betrayal, transforming her infidelity into a kind of favor to both of us. It was masterful in its way, this ability to reframe devastating deception as enlightened self-awareness. When do you want me to move out? I asked. Lauren looked surprised. You don't have to move out immediately. We can work out the details through our lawyers. I'm not heartless, Gerald. Not heartless, just calculating, manipulative, and capable of maintaining an elaborate deception for years while planning my replacement. But not heartless. I stood up, feeling older than my 56 years. I'll contact a lawyer on Monday. Gerald, she called as I reached the kitchen doorway. When I turned back, she looked almost like the woman I'd thought I'd married. Almost. I really am sorry it happened this way. I never wanted to hurt you. I studied her face, looking for any sign that she understood the magnitude of what she'd done. But there was only mild regret, the kind of polite sadness someone might feel about a business decision that unfortunately affected other people. No, I said quietly. You just wanted to replace me. The hurt was just collateral damage. As I walked upstairs to our bedroom, I could hear Lauren on the phone. Her voice animated in a way it hadn't been during our conversation. She was calling Frank, I realized, telling him that the secret was out, that they could accelerate their timeline, that the inconvenient husband had finally been dealt with. I sat on the edge of our bed, surrounded by the remnants of a life I'd thought was real. The woman downstairs wasn't the person I'd married, or maybe she was, and I'd simply never seen her clearly. Either way, the Gerald who'd woken up that morning believing in his marriage was as gone as the Lauren who'd once loved him. Tomorrow, I would start the process of untangling 28 years of shared life. But tonight, I needed to grieve not just for my marriage, but for the man I'd been when I still believed in it. Monday morning, I sat across from David Morrison, the same lawyer who'd handled our wills 5 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me that Lauren had consulted with his firm about divorcing me while I was now seeking his help to protect myself from her plans. "Gerald, I have to tell you, this is one of the most calculated divorce strategies I've seen in 30 years of practice," David said, reviewing the documents I'd brought him. "Your wife has been building this case for a very long time." I nodded, watching him flip through photographs of the apartment, copies of the legal consultation notes, and printouts of Lauren's carefully documented evidence against me. "What are my options?" David leaned back in his leather chair, his expression thoughtful. "Well, the good news is that her strategy depends on you being unprepared and uninformed. The fact that you discovered this before she filed changes everything." He tapped the consultation summary. "She was planning to paint you as emotionally unavailable and financially irresponsible, but we can counter that narrative." "How?" "With facts. You've been the stable, supportive spouse for 28 years. You've never been unfaithful. You've supported her career advancement, and you've managed your joint finances responsibly." David smiled grimly. "More importantly, you have evidence of her systematic deception and adultery that matters even in a no-fault state." Over the next 2 hours, David walked me through the reality of my situation. While Texas was indeed a community property state, Lauren's adultery and deception could impact the division of assets. More importantly, her documented plans to manipulate the divorce proceedings could seriously undermine her credibility with a judge. "There's something else," I said, pulling out a folder. "I'd prepared over the weekend. I've been doing some financial analysis." David raised an eyebrow as I spread out spreadsheets and bank statements across his desk. This was where my accounting background became invaluable. While Lauren had been busy documenting my alleged emotional failures, I'd been quietly tracking our financial reality. "Lauren makes $200,000 a year as CEO," I explained. "But our joint expenses have been running about $60,000 more than her salary for the past 3 years. I've been subsidizing her lifestyle without realizing it." David studied the numbers, his expression growing increasingly interested. "How my practice generates about $120,000 annually. I've been putting $80,000 into our joint account, keeping only $40,000 for my business expenses and personal needs. I thought I was being generous, allowing her to save more of her salary for our future. I pointed to a series of withdrawals from our savings account, but she's been drawing down our joint savings to maintain the apartment with Frank." The revelation was in the details. While I'd been living modestly and contributing most of my income to our shared expenses, Lauren had been using our joint resources to fund her separate life. The apartment rent, the dinners, the weekend trips I'd never taken, the gifts she'd given Frank. All of it had been paid for with money I'd earned and contributed to what I'd believed was our shared future. "This is fraud," David said bluntly. "She's been using marital assets to fund an adulterous relationship while planning to divorce you. That's going to significantly impact how a judge views the asset division." But I wasn't done. Over the weekend, I'd done something that felt foreign to my naturally trusting nature. I'd investigated my own wife's business dealings. What I'd found had shocked me even more than her personal betrayal. "There's more," I said, pulling out another set of documents. "Lauren's been positioning Frank to take over more responsibilities at Meridian Technologies. But according to the corporate filings I found, she's been doing it in ways that violate her fiduciary duty to the company's board." David's eyes sharpened. "Explain." "Frank was hired as vice president of business development 3 years ago, but Lauren's been systematically transferring responsibilities to him that should require board approval. She's essentially been grooming him to replace her as CEO while positioning herself as president. But she's never presented this reorganization to the board officially." I'd spent hours reviewing publicly available corporate documents, cross-referencing them with the business plan I'd found in their apartment. Lauren and Frank's vision for the company's future involved significant structural changes that would require stockholder approval, but according to the official records, these changes had never been properly presented or voted on. "She's been operating under the assumption that she can unilaterally restructure the company to benefit her relationship with Frank," I continued. "But the board doesn't know about their personal relationship, and they certainly don't know about the corporate reorganization she's been implementing without their approval." David was taking notes rapidly. "Now, Gerald, this isn't just about your divorce anymore. If what you're saying is accurate, Lauren could be facing serious professional consequences." The thought gave me no pleasure. I'd loved this woman for 28 years, and I took no joy in uncovering evidence that could destroy her career, but I also couldn't ignore the reality that she'd been systematically betraying not just me, but her professional obligations as well. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "We file first," David said without hesitation. "We get ahead of her narrative and present the facts before she can spin them. More importantly, we make sure the board at Meridian Technologies understands what's been happening under their noses." That afternoon, I did something that went against every instinct I'd developed over our 28-year marriage. I stopped protecting Lauren from the consequences of her actions. I called Richard Hayes, the chairman of Meridian's board of directors. Richard and I had met several times at company functions over the years, and I'd always liked his straightforward approach to business. "Gerald, what can I do for you?" Richard's voice was warm, unsuspecting. "Richard, I need to bring something to your attention regarding corporate governance issues at Meridian. It's complicated, but I think the board needs to be aware of some structural changes that may not have been properly authorized." There was a pause. "What kind of structural changes?" I spent the next 20 minutes carefully outlining what I'd discovered, sticking to facts and avoiding personal details about my marriage. Richard listened without interruption, his questions growing more pointed as I described the unauthorized reorganization that had been taking place. "Jesus, Gerald, are you saying Lauren's been implementing major corporate changes without board approval?" "I'm saying that based on the documents I've seen, there appears to be a significant disconnect between what's been happening operationally and what's been reported to the board. And you're bringing this to me because I took a deep breath because I believe in corporate integrity and because the board has a right to know what's being done in their name." After I hung up, I sat in my office feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. For years, I'd been the supportive husband who cleaned up Lauren's messes, smoothed over her occasional ethical shortcuts, and provided the stable foundation that allowed her to take professional risks. Now, I was the one creating consequences she'd have to face. That evening, Lauren came home later than usual. Her face was tight with stress. Her usual composed demeanor cracked around the edges. "We need to talk," she said, setting her briefcase down with more force than necessary. "About what?" "About the call Richard Hayes made to me this afternoon. About the corporate governance review the board has suddenly decided to conduct." Her eyes were hard, calculating, about the fact that my own husband is apparently trying to destroy my career. I met her gaze steadily. I shared factual information about corporate reorganization that appeared to lack proper authorization, nothing more. "Don't play innocent with me, Gerald. You knew exactly what you were doing." "Yes, I did. The same way you knew exactly what you were doing when you spent 2 years planning my replacement." Lauren's composure finally cracked. "This is different, and you know it. This affects my professional reputation, my ability to make a living. Your affair with Frank affects that, too. The board's going to find out eventually that you've been restructuring the company to benefit your personal relationship." I just gave them a head start. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her reassessing everything she thought she knew about me. The passive, supportive husband who'd never challenged her decisions was gone. In his place was someone who understood the value of information and wasn't afraid to use it. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want you to stop treating me like I'm stupid," I said. "I want you to acknowledge that your actions have consequences beyond your personal happiness, and I want you to understand that I'm not going to quietly disappear just because it would be convenient for your new life plan." Lauren sat down across from me, her posture defensive. "The board review will pass. There's nothing illegal about operational restructuring. Maybe not illegal, but unauthorized restructuring that benefits your romantic partner. That's going to be harder to explain, especially when the board realizes you never disclosed your relationship with Frank." I could see her working through the implications, her quick mind calculating the political and professional costs of her choices. For the first time since I'd discovered her betrayal, Lauren looked genuinely worried. "What's it going to take to make this go away?" she asked. "It's not going away, Lauren. You set this in motion when you decided to live a double life. Now we all have to deal with the consequences. You're destroying everything I've worked for." I shook my head. "You destroyed it yourself. I'm just refusing to help you cover it up anymore." That night, as Lauren made phone calls behind closed doors and I could hear the stress in her voice, I realized something fundamental had shifted. For 28 years, I'd been the one adapting, accommodating, making space for her ambitions and choices. Now, for the first time, she was the one having to adapt to consequences she couldn't control. It wasn't revenge exactly. It was something quieter, but more powerful. The simple refusal to continue enabling someone who'd been systematically betraying me. Lauren had built her new life on the assumption that I would remain passive, predictable, manageable. She was about to discover how wrong that assumption had been. The next morning, I filed for divorce, but more importantly, I stopped being the man who made Lauren's life easier at the expense of his own dignity. After 56 years of believing that love meant endless accommodation, I was finally learning that sometimes love means knowing when to stop. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, making coffee for one, and finding genuine peace in the simplicity of it. The morning sun streamed through windows I'd chosen in a space that was entirely mine, free from the weight of deception and false harmony that had defined my life for so long. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago. Despite Lauren's initial threats and manipulations, the evidence I'd gathered had shifted the entire dynamic of our settlement. When faced with documented proof of her adultery, financial deception, and professional misconduct, her lawyer had advised her to accept a more equitable division of assets than she'd originally planned. I kept the house, the one we'd shared for 20 years, but which I'd largely paid for with my contributions to our joint expenses. Lauren kept her retirement accounts and half of our savings, minus the amount she'd spent on maintaining her secret life with Frank. It was fair in a way that her original divorce strategy would never have been. But the real satisfaction came not from the financial settlement, but from watching Lauren face the consequences of choices she'd thought she could make without accountability. The corporate governance review at Meridian Technologies had been thorough and devastating. While the board hadn't found anything criminally actionable, they discovered a pattern of unauthorized decision-making and undisclosed conflicts of interest that had seriously undermined Lauren's credibility as a leader. Frank had been terminated immediately once his relationship with Lauren became known to the board. His position as vice president had been contingent on his professional judgment being uncompromised by personal interests, and his romantic involvement with the CEO represented an irreconcilable conflict of interest. Lauren had managed to keep her job, but barely. She'd been placed on probation. Her decision-making authority had been significantly restricted, and she was required to report to a newly appointed chief operating officer who essentially supervised her every move. The woman who'd built her identity around professional power and autonomy was now working under closer oversight than she'd experienced since her first corporate job 20 years ago. Their apartment at Harbor View had been given up quietly. Frank had moved back to Denver, taking a position with a smaller firm at considerably less money than he'd been making at Meridian. Lauren had moved into a modest one-bedroom place closer to her office, a significant downgrade from the luxury she'd become accustomed to. I learned about these developments not through direct contact, but through the small network of mutual friends and professional acquaintances that inevitably carried news in a city like ours. Some of these people had reached out to me after the divorce, expressing surprise at the circumstances, and in a few cases apologizing for having believed Lauren's carefully constructed narrative about our marriage's decline. I had no idea. Sarah Martinez, one of Lauren's former colleagues, had told me when we'd run into each other at the grocery store. She made it sound like you'd grown apart gradually, like it was mutual. Nobody knew about Frank. These conversations had been validating in ways I hadn't expected. For months, I'd been questioning my own perceptions, wondering if I'd really been as inadequate a husband as Lauren had claimed. Learning that even her closest professional friends had been deceived, helped me understand that her capacity for manipulation extended far beyond our marriage. But the most profound change wasn't in Lauren's circumstances or in the validation I'd received from others. It was in my own relationship with myself. For the first time in decades, I was living without the constant undercurrent of someone else's dissatisfaction. I hadn't realized how much energy I'd been spending, trying to anticipate Lauren's needs, accommodate her moods, and compensate for whatever was missing in our relationship that I'd apparently been too dense to understand. My apartment was smaller than our house, but it felt spacious in ways that had nothing to do with square footage. I could read in the evening without worrying that my contentment with simple pleasures was somehow disappointing to someone who needed more stimulation. I could cook meals I actually wanted to eat instead of trying to impress someone who was probably texting her real partner while sitting across from me. I'd even started dating, something I'd thought would be impossible at 56 after 28 years of marriage. Margaret was a widow I'd met through my church, a gentle woman who appreciated conversation about books and enjoyed quiet dinners without needing them to be productions. She found my contentment with simple pleasures charming rather than limiting, and her uncomplicated affection was a revelation after years of trying to earn love from someone who'd been systematically withdrawing it. The strangest part was realizing how much happier I was without the marriage I'd thought I'd been fighting to save. Lauren had been right about one thing. We had grown incompatible, but not in the way she'd described. She'd become someone who could maintain elaborate deceptions while accepting love from someone she was actively betraying. I'd remained someone who believed in honesty, loyalty, and the possibility of working through problems together. Her version of growth had required discarding the values that had built our marriage. My version of growth was learning to protect those values from people who would exploit them. One evening in late spring, I was sitting on the small balcony of my apartment, reading and enjoying the sunset when my phone rang. Lauren's name appeared on the screen, the first time she'd called since our divorce was finalized. I almost didn't answer. We had nothing left to discuss, no shared obligations that required communication, but curiosity won. "Hello, Lauren. Gerald. Her voice sounded tired, older somehow. I hope I'm not disturbing you. What can I do for you? There was a long pause. I wanted to apologize for how everything happened, for the way I handled things. I waited, saying nothing. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, about the choices I made. Another pause. You didn't deserve what I put you through. No, I didn't. I convinced myself that our marriage was already over, that I was just being honest about reality. But the truth is, I ended it long before I admitted it to myself. I ended it when I decided you weren't enough anymore. Instead of trying to work with you to build something better. I found myself genuinely curious about this conversation. What's prompted this reflection? Lauren let out a sound that might have been a laugh, but without humor, losing everything I thought I wanted. Frank and I lasted exactly 6 weeks after he moved to Denver. Turns out our great love affair was more about the excitement of secrecy and the thrill of planning a new life than about actually wanting to live together day to day. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? She sounded genuinely curious. I considered the question honestly. Yes, I am. I'm sorry you threw away 28 years for something that wasn't real. I'm sorry you hurt so many people in pursuit of something that didn't exist. I'm sorry you discovered too late that what we had was actually valuable. Do you ever think about what might have happened if I'd just talked to you? If I'd been honest about feeling restless instead of creating this whole elaborate deception sometimes, I admitted. But Lauren, the problem wasn't that you felt restless or wanted more from life. The problem was that you chose deception and betrayal instead of honest communication. You chose to replace me instead of working with me. I know that now. Do you? Because even in this apology, you're focusing on the outcome that didn't work out for you, not on the damage you caused along the way. You're sorry that your strategy failed, not sorry that your strategy involved systematically lying to someone who loved you. Silence stretched between us. You're right, she said finally. Even now, I'm still making it about me. Yes, you are. I hope you're happy, Gerald. I hope you found someone who appreciates what I was too selfish to value. I have. Her name is Margaret, and she's everything you never were. Honest, kind, and capable of love without manipulation. Good. You deserve that. After she hung up, I sat on my balcony as the sun finished setting, thinking about the strange journey that had brought me to this peaceful evening. A year ago, I'd been living a lie without knowing it. Married to someone who was systematically planning my replacement while accepting my love and support. Now I was alone but not lonely. Starting over but not starting from scratch. I'd learned that contentment wasn't a character flaw and that my capacity for loyalty and trust, while it had made me vulnerable to exploitation, was also what made me capable of real intimacy with someone who shared those values. Lauren had seen my satisfaction with our quiet life as evidence of my limitations. Margaret saw it as evidence of my ability to find joy in authentic connection rather than needing constant external validation. The difference wasn't in what I offered, but in who was receiving it. As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on something that would have surprised the Gerald of a year ago. I was grateful for Lauren's betrayal, not because I'd enjoyed the pain of discovery or the difficulty of divorce, but because it had freed me from a relationship that was slowly killing my spirit. For years, I'd been trying to be enough for someone who had decided I wasn't. I'd been accepting love as a conditional gift that could be withdrawn if I failed to meet evolving standards I was never allowed to understand. I'd been living in fear of disappointing someone who was already planning my replacement. Now I was living with someone who loved me, not despite my contentment with simple pleasures, but because of it. Someone who saw my loyalty as a gift rather than an expectation. My honesty as a treasure rather than a burden. At 56, I'd learned that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is losing something you thought you couldn't live without. Sometimes freedom comes disguised as loss. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling someone who's been systematically betraying you. Lauren had been right about one thing. We both deserved to be with someone who truly understood us. She deserved someone capable of the same level of deception and manipulation that she was. And I deserved someone whose love didn't come with conditions, expiration dates, and exit strategies. As I turned off the lights in my small, honest apartment, I realized that for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged.
And that concludes this story. That was a pretty wild one if you ask me. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Now, let's get right into the next story. It's titled,
On Father's Day, my wife and her daughter gave me a mug that said, "World's biggest disappointment." They all laughed. I smiled, said, "Thanks," and cleaned the dishes. That night, I packed my bags. 2 weeks later, my wife posted, "Please, if anyone knows where he is, tell him we just want him home." Look, I'm not the kind of guy who wakes up on Father's Day expecting a parade or anything. But maybe, just maybe, I thought I'd get something better than becoming the punchline to a joke I didn't even know was being written. But that's exactly what happened. And honestly, I should have seen it coming from a mile away. It was one of those perfect June mornings where the sun's streaming through the kitchen windows like it's auditioning for a Folders commercial. And I'm shuffling down the hallway in my ratty plaid pajama pants, thinking maybe, just maybe, today would be different. Maybe today I'd actually feel like part of this family instead of the guy who pays the mortgage and occasionally gets acknowledged when the lawn needs mowing or the garbage disposal starts making that demon possession sound again. The kitchen was already buzzing when I walked in. My wife Lydia was there with her signature coffee mug, the one that says, "But first, coffee." Like she's the most relatable human being on the planet, and her daughter Madison was perched on the counter like she owned the place, which, let's be honest, she basically did. My stepson Eli was hovering near the doorway with his phone out, and I noticed he had that look on his face, the one where he's trying real hard not to crack up about something. I figured they were watching some TikTok or whatever the kids are into these days. Probably something involving someone falling off a skateboard or a cat knocking stuff off a table. You know, normal internet stuff. Happy Father's Day. Lydia practically sang it. Her voice hitting that octave that women use when they're either genuinely excited or about to tell you they backed the car into the mailbox again. She was holding this box, not wrapped, just a plain cardboard box like something you'd get from Amazon. And she had this huge grin plastered across her face like she'd just discovered the cure for boredom. I should have known right then. That grin was too big, too excited. The kind of grin that means trouble is wearing a party hat and waiting to jump out from behind the furniture. Open it. Open it. Madison was practically bouncing. Her phone also out now because apparently this moment needed to be documented for posterity or Instagram. Same difference these days. I took the box because what else was I going to do? Refuse? Tell them I had a bad feeling about this. Nah, that would have made me look paranoid and ungrateful, and I'd already been labeled as too sensitive enough times in this house to last me 3 lifetimes. So, I opened it, peeling back the cardboard flaps like I was defusing a bomb, which in retrospect would have been less emotionally destructive. Inside, nestled in some tissue paper like it was precious cargo, was a mug, just a plain white ceramic mug. For a split second, I thought maybe it would say something normal, something that wouldn't make me want to crawl into said mug and disappear. World's best stepdad would have been fine. Dad would have been great. Hell, even world's okayest father figure would have gotten a genuine laugh out of me. But no, what it said in big, bold, impossible to ignore letters was world's biggest disappointment. I stood there holding this mug like it was evidence in a murder trial. My own emotional murder specifically. And I waited for the punchline. You know, the part where someone says, "Just kidding. Here's your real gift." But that moment never came. Instead, what came was laughter. Not just giggles or chuckles, but full-on doubled-over can't-breathe laughter. Lydia was wiping tears from her eyes. Madison was slapping the counter. Eli, to his credit, looked slightly uncomfortable, but he was still filming, still capturing every second of my public humiliation for whatever group chat or social media platform they decided was worthy of witnessing my degradation. "Oh my God, your face." Lydia managed to gasp between laughs. "I told you he'd be shocked. It's hilarious, right?" Madison added like she was waiting for me to confirm that yes, this was indeed the pinnacle of comedy and I should be grateful to be roasted alive on Father's Day of all days. I felt my face doing that thing where it tries to decide between crying and rage-quitting life. But instead, it settled on something worse, a smile, a big fake my face might actually crack from the effort smile because that's what I did in this house. I smiled. I went along with it. I was the good sport, the guy who could take a joke, the human punching bag who always came back for more because, hey, at least they were paying attention to me, right? "Thanks," I said, and I even managed to throw in a little laugh that sounded like someone was strangling a whoopee cushion. I've always wanted my self-esteem in ceramic form. Really, this is perfect. I'll cherish it forever. That made them laugh even harder because of course it did. Nothing funnier than a guy making jokes about his own roasting, right? It's like when you laugh at yourself, it gives everyone else permission to laugh twice as hard. It's this weird psychological loophole that basically means you're doing their job for them. Lydia came over and patted my shoulder like I was a golden retriever who just learned a new trick. "See, I knew you'd get it. You always have such a good sense of humor about things." Yeah, a good sense of humor. That's what we're calling it now. Not slowly dying inside while maintaining a socially acceptable facade. Not swallowing anger and humiliation like their daily vitamins. Nope. Just a good sense of humor. That's me. Jack Harris, comedian extraordinaire. Laughing at jokes where he's the punchline and the setup and the entire goddamn premise. I set the mug down on the counter carefully because wouldn't want to break it. That would be rude. And noticed there was breakfast already laid out. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, the whole 9 yards. Except none of it was for me. They'd already eaten. The dishes were piled in the sink, crusty with syrup and egg residue, and I could see the empty orange juice carton sitting on the counter like a tombstone for my expectations. "Oh, we already ate," Lydia said, following my gaze. "We thought you'd sleep in longer, but hey, feel free to make yourself something. Feel free like it was a privilege. Like I should be grateful for the opportunity to cook my own Father's Day breakfast after being presented with a mug that basically screamed, 'You suck,' in ceramic form." "No problem," I said, still smiling, still playing the role I'd been cast in without auditioning. "I'll just clean these up first." And I did. I stood there at that sink, scrubbing dried pancake batter off plates while they migrated to the living room, their laughter fading into the background hum of the TV. I scrubbed until my hands were pruny and the water ran cold. And I thought about all the Father's Days that had come before this one. The ties I'd gotten that I never wore. The best dad cards that felt hollow because I wasn't really their dad, was I? I was Lydia's husband. Madison and Eli's mom's husband. The guy who signed permission slips and showed up to recital and helped with homework, but never quite made it into the inner circle. But this was different. This wasn't just forgetting or being thoughtless. This was intentional. This was planned. They'd gone to a store or ordered it online, more likely, and they'd specifically chosen a mug that said, "World's biggest disappointment." And they'd thought, "Yeah, this is perfect for Jack. This is exactly how we see him." I dried my hands on the dish towel that said, "Home is where the heart is." Ironic considering my heart was currently being shredded like documents at a scandal-ridden corporation. And I made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not a throw the mug through the window, storm out in a blaze of glory kind of decision, just a quiet one, a simple one. I was done that night. After everyone had gone to bed, after I'd smiled through dinner, after I'd laughed at Madison's story about some guy at school, after I'd said goodnight like everything was normal, I packed a bag. Not everything, just the essentials. 2 shirts, some jeans, underwear, socks, my toolbox from the garage, because a man doesn't go anywhere without his tools. And that last little shred of dignity I'd been hoarding like a dragon guarding treasure. I didn't leave a note. Didn't write some long explanation about feelings or boundaries or emotional abuse wrapped in jokes. What would have been the point? They'd either get it or they wouldn't. And based on the events of the day, I was betting heavily on wouldn't. I just walked out the front door with my duffel bag and my toolbox, got in my car, and drove. No dramatic music, no perfectly timed rain, just me, the hum of the engine, and the growing distance between myself and a house that had stopped feeling like home somewhere between I do and world's biggest disappointment. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being the joke. Eventually, you realize you don't have to stay for the punchline. You can just leave. Walk out mid-setup. Unsubscribe from the whole damn show. And that's exactly what I did. You know what's funny about leaving? And I mean really leaving, not just threatening to leave while you're standing in the driveway having a meltdown that the neighbors will definitely discuss at their next book club meeting. It's that nobody actually expects you to do it quietly. Everyone's got this script in their head about how these things are supposed to go down. There's supposed to be yelling, door slamming. Maybe someone throws a lamp or drives their car through the garage door. Very Lifetime movie network. Very theatrical. But me, I went full ghost mode. No dramatic monologue about how they'd ruin me. No, you'll regret this when I'm gone. Speech delivered from the doorway while thunder crashes in the background. I didn't even leave a sticky note on the fridge. Just pure unfiltered silence. The kind of silence that's somehow louder than any argument could ever be. I ended up at this motel off Route 18 called the Silver Rest Inn, which was the kind of name that promised way more than it delivered. It should have been called the Rust and Regret Motel, or maybe the Please Don't Look Under the Beds Inn because that would have been more accurate advertising. $49 a night. And for that premium price, you got paper-thin walls, a TV that only got 3 channels. All of them showing infomercials for products that look like they've been invented by someone having a fever dream, and complimentary roaches that skewered across the bathroom floor like they were late for a very important meeting. The guy at the front desk didn't even look up when I checked in. Just slid me a key attached to a piece of plastic with the room number written in Sharpie and went back to watching what appeared to be a documentary about UFOs. I appreciated that honestly. No questions, no rough night, buddy. No concerned looks, just business. Cold, impersonal, beautiful business. Room 12 was exactly what you'd expect from a $49 a night establishment. One bed that sagged in the middle like it had given up on life years ago. A nightstand with a lamp that flickered like it was trying to communicate in Morse code. A painting of a boat on the wall that was somehow both boring and unsettling at the same time. Like the boat knew something I didn't and wasn't planning to share. The carpet was that specific pattern that exists solely in cheap motel and casinos designed to hide stains and the sins of previous occupants. I dropped my bag on the bed and just stood there for a minute listening to the sounds of the place. Someone was having an argument 3 doors down. A couple from the sound of it really going at it about whose turn it was to buy groceries. Above me, someone was either moving furniture or practicing their wrestling moves. The ice machine down the hall made this grinding noise every few minutes that sounded like a robot dying slowly. This was my life now. This was what I'd chosen or what had been chosen for me. The line between those two things was getting pretty blurry. I lay down on that sad excuse for a mattress and stared at the popcorn ceiling, counting the stains and wondering about their origin stories. That one probably came from a leak. That one looked like someone had thrown something. That one was shaped like Florida, which felt appropriate since this whole situation was about as chaotic and unpredictable as that entire state. The thing about leaving, really leaving, is that nobody prepares you for the aftermath. Not the legal stuff or the logistics, but the mental part. The part where you lie in a crappy motel room and wonder when exactly your family stopped being your family and started being an audience that applauded every time you tripped over your own dignity. Was it gradual? Did I miss the signs? Or did it happen all at once? And I was just too busy being the good sport to notice. I spent that first week in a fog. I'd wake up, stare at the ceiling until the maid knocked and asked if I wanted housekeeping. I didn't because letting a stranger see how pathetic my temporary living situation was felt like adding insult to injury. And then I'd shuffle down to the convenience store on the corner for coffee that tasted like it had been brewed in a tire and maybe a breakfast burrito that was definitely older than it should have been but cost $2. So, who was I to complain? My phone stayed off. I wasn't ready for the barrage of texts and calls that I knew would come eventually. The where are you messages that would be less about concern and more about inconvenience because that's what I was right. An inconvenience. The guy who paid bills and fixed things but had the audacity to have feelings about being publicly humiliated. 2 weeks. That's how long it took. I finally turned my phone on because I needed to check my bank account. Poverty waits for no man's emotional breakdown. And that's when I saw it. 17 missed calls from Lydia, 34 text messages, and then because apparently private communication wasn't dramatic enough, a Facebook post that had been up for 3 days and already had 200 comments. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have looked. It was like knowing there's a horror movie on TV and you shouldn't watch it before bed, but you do it anyway because apparently you hate yourself. So, I clicked on Lydia's profile and there it was, pinned to the top of her page like a missing persons poster. Please, if anyone knows where he is, tell him we just want him home. We love him and miss him so much. Jack, if you're reading this, we're sorry. Please come back. The kids are devastated. And attached to this heartfelt plea, a photo of me. Not a recent photo, mind you. No, this was from 2 summers ago at the neighborhood barbecue where I'm holding a grill spatula like I'm King Arthur pulling Excalibur from the stone, wearing an apron that says Grill Sergeant and smiling like I just won the lottery. I looked happy in that photo. I look like a guy who belongs somewhere. The comment section was exactly what you'd expect from Facebook, a toxic blend of genuine concern and people who just wanted to be part of the drama. Sandra from Lydia's Pilates class. Praying for you, hun. He'll come back when he's ready. Kevin from my old job. Bro, wherever you are, just know we're thinking about you. Lydia's sister Diane, who never liked me anyway. Some people just can't handle commitment. Stay strong, sis. Not one of them knew. Not one single person in that comment section had any clue that Lydia had given me a mug that might as well have been a certificate of emotional abuse. That Madison had filmed my humiliation like it was content for her Instagram story. That I'd spent Father's Day scrubbing their dirty dishes while they laughed about how funny it was to crush whatever was left of my self-respect. But here's what really got me. The thing that made me actually laugh out loud in that depressing motel room, scaring away one of my roach roommates. She'd said the kids were devastated. The same kids who'd thought world's biggest disappointment was comedy gold. The same kids who'd gone about their day after I left like nothing had happened because to them nothing had happened. I was just the guy who was there and then wasn't. And maybe they'd notice when something needed fixing or someone needed to play ATM. I sat there on that sagging mattress, phone in hand, and I had this moment of clarity. You know those moments where everything suddenly makes sense and you can see the whole picture instead of just the tiny corner you've been staring at for years. Yeah, one of those. None of them actually wanted me home. What they wanted was the idea of me home. They wanted the guy who paid the mortgage and didn't complain. That was the first thing I'd gotten right in years. If you've never had the privilege of living in a budget motel for an extended period of time, let me paint you a picture. Actually, scratch that. Let me give you the full sensory experience. Because this place assaulted all 5 senses with the enthusiasm of a door-to-door salesman who won't take no for an answer. The smell hit you first. It was this unique combination of industrial cleaning products, cigarette smoke from 1987, and something I can only describe as despair with notes of mildew. The kind of smell that clings to your clothes and follows you around like a ghost that's really committed to haunting you. I went through an entire bottle of Frezza in the first 3 days, and it didn't make a dent. That smell was permanent. It was part of the infrastructure now, probably load-bearing at this point. The silver rest and had this aesthetic that I like to call given up. The carpet, which I mentioned before, but deserves another shout-out for being spectacularly hideous, was this brown and orange pattern that looked like someone had asked an AI to design the 1970s, but make it sad. There were stains on that carpet that probably had their own zip codes. I made a rule early on, never walk barefoot. Never. I wore shoes at all times, even to go from the bed to the bathroom, which was exactly 7 steps, but felt like a journey through a hazmat zone. The bathroom itself was a whole other adventure. The tiles were that specific shade of off-white that suggested they'd started out as actual white about 30 years ago and had slowly given up on life. The grout was basically black at this point, and I'm pretty sure the shower curtain was the same one that had been there when the place opened in what I'm guessing was 1973. It had this pattern of ducks on it, but the ducks looked angry like they knew they'd been stuck in this bathroom for decades and were plotting revenge. The shower had 2 settings, scalding hot or ice cold. No in between. No comfortable temperature that won't cause third-degree burns or hypothermia. You had to pick your torture method every morning. I usually went with scalding because at least that woke me up, though I'm pretty sure I lost a few layers of skin in the process. But the real stars of the silver rest in the vending machines. There were 2 of them positioned right outside the lobby like sentries guarding the entrance to disappointment. One allegedly sold snacks, the other allegedly sold drinks. I say allegedly because these machines operated on some kind of chaotic neutral alignment where sometimes they'd give you what you paid for and sometimes they'd just take your money and laugh at you. Well, not literally laugh though. Given everything else about this place, I wouldn't have been surprised if they did. My first week there, I lost $1 to the snack machine. I pressed before, which should have given me a bag of Doritos, the Cool Ranch kind that I'd been craving. And the machine made this grinding noise like it was thinking really hard about my request. Then nothing. The spiral thing turned. The chips moved forward about half an inch and then just stopped. Hung there, taunting me. I could see them through the glass. So close but so far, like some kind of philosophical metaphor about life that I wasn't in the mood to appreciate. I did what any reasonable person would do. I shook the machine gently at first, then with increasing aggression until the guy from the front desk, different guy than the UFO documentary enthusiast, this one was watching what appeared to be a cooking show, yelled out, "Machine's broken. Has been for months. Then why is it still here?" I yelled back. "Owner says it's too expensive to fix or remove." Perfect. That was just perfect. Even the vending machines at this place were giving up on life. The TV in my room became my best friend out of sheer necessity. It only got 3 channels, like I mentioned, but I memorized the schedule within days. Channel 3 was all infomercials all the time. I learned about knives that could cut through shoes, blenders that could supposedly blend iPads, though why you'd want to blend an iPad was never explained. And something called the pocket hose that looked like it would break the second you looked at it wrong. Channel 7 was local news on repeat. The same stories cycling every 4 hours like some kind of Groundhog Day situation. And Channel 11 was the jackpot. Classic TV shows and movies from the 80s and 90s. I watched Pawn Stars like it was my job. I knew every episode. I could predict what the expert would say. I knew which items would sell and which ones would walk out the door with disappointed owners who thought their grandmother's antique spoon collection was worth thousands but was actually worth maybe $50 on a good day. There was something comforting about it. Watching other people learn that their treasures were actually trash. Felt relatable. My only real companion during those first weeks was a fly. Not just any fly. This was a persistent little bastard that refused to die despite my best efforts. I tried swatting it with a rolled-up newspaper. Missed every time. The fly had reflexes like a fighter pilot. I tried leaving the window open, hoping it would fly out to freedom, but it apparently liked the silver rest in. Maybe it had low standards. Maybe it was as stuck as I was. Eventually, I named him Carl because he deserved a name. Carl the Fly. He'd buzz around the room, land on the TV screen right in the middle of whatever I was watching, and just sit there like he was watching, too. Sometimes I talked to him. Yes, I'm aware how pathetic that sounds. Yes, I was fully conscious of the fact that I'd hit a new low when my primary social interaction was with an insect. But Carl didn't judge me. Carl didn't give me mugs that insulted my existence. Carl was just there living his best fly life. And honestly, that made him more loyal than anyone I'd left behind. But here's the thing about rock bottom. And I say this as someone who is actively getting to know the geological composition of rock bottom very intimately. You can only stay there for so long before you either dig deeper or start climbing back up. And I'm not a digger by nature. I'm a fixer. That's what I do. I fix things. Broken cabinets, leaky faucets, relationships that were doomed from the start. Okay, maybe I wasn't so great at that last one, but the principle stood. About 3 weeks into my stay at the Silver Rest Inn, I woke up one morning and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, really looked at myself, and what I saw was a guy who'd let himself go in the very specific way that men do when they stop caring. My hair was getting long in that I've given up on society way, not this stylish man bun way. My beard had gone from rugged to might be hiding a family of birds in there. I was wearing the same shirt I'd worn for 3 days because laundry required effort in quarters and I was short on both. This is pathetic, Jack, I said to my reflection. Carl buzzed past like even he agreed. So I did something radical. I took a shower scalding naturally and I actually used soap everywhere. I even used the complimentary shampoo that came in those tiny bottles that never have enough product to actually wash anything but make you feel like you're getting your money's worth. Then I dug through my bag, found my least wrinkled shirt, and got dressed like I was going somewhere that mattered. I walked to the barber shop 2 blocks away, a real old school place called Tony's with one of those spinning red and white poles outside and pictures of hairstyles from 1965 in the window. Tony himself was probably 70, had forearms like Popeye, and didn't ask me a single question about why I looked like I'd been living in the woods. He just sat me down, asked how I wanted it cut, and got to work. 20 minutes later, I looked human again. Not great, but human. That's all I needed. Next stop, Willow Creek Hardware, a family-owned place I'd driven past about 100 times on my way to and from the motel. I walked in, found the manager, a woman named Susan, who had kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, and asked if they were hiring. She looked me up and down. You know tools? I know tools like some people know their family members better actually. She cracked a smile. When can you start? Right now if you want. And just like that, I had a job. Minimum wage plus commission. But it was something. It was purpose. It was a reason to get out of that motel room and interact with humans instead of Carl. The customers at Willow Creek Hardware were exactly what you'd expect from a small town hardware store. Old men who wanted to tell you their entire life story while shopping for a single bolt. Contractors who knew exactly what they needed and moved like efficiency machines, and confused homeowners who'd started projects way above their skill level and were now desperately trying to fix their mistakes before their spouses found out. I liked them, all of them, because they treated me like a person. They asked my advice. They laughed at my jokes, actual laughs, not the kind of laughter that feels like someone's twisting a knife. And the cashier, Melissa, flirted with me in that harmless way that people do when they're just being friendly. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I was someone. Not a husband, not a stepdad, not a punchline, just Jack. Jack who knew the difference between a Phillips and a flathead. Jack who could recommend the right drill bit for any job. Jack who existed independently of anyone else's narrative about who he was supposed to be. And that feeling, that tiny spark of being seen and valued for something other than my wallet or my ability to tolerate abuse, that was worth more than all the Father's Day mugs in the world. There's this thing that happens when you start over. And I mean really start over. Not just talking about starting over while you're 3 beers deep and feeling philosophical on a Tuesday night. You start noticing things, small things, things you took for granted or didn't even realize existed when you were busy being someone's emotional punching bag disguised as a family man. Like mornings, for instance. Mornings at the Silver Rest Inn were objectively terrible. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbor's alarm go off at 5:30 every single day, followed by what sounded like him doing full body slams into furniture, but they were mine. Nobody was asking me to make breakfast for people who'd probably spend it making jokes at my expense. Nobody was reminding me about the 17 things that needed fixing around the house. Nobody was giving me that look. You know the one. The look that says, "You're here, but we don't really see you." I'd wake up, throw on whatever cleanish clothes I had left, and walk the 6 blocks to Nora's Diner. It became my routine, my ritual, my one consistent thing in a life that had gone from structured and predictable to completely off the rails. Nora's Diner was one of those places that time forgot, but in a good way. Red vinyl booths with duct tape covering the cracks, black and white checkered floor that had probably been installed during the Eisenhower administration, and a counter with those spinning stools that squeaked every time someone rotated. The whole place smelled like bacon grease and coffee that had been sitting on the burner just a little too long. And it was perfect. The coffee at Norris tasted like regret if regret was something you could brew at exactly 195 degrees and serve in chipped mugs that didn't have insulting messages on them. It was strong enough to strip paint and probably violated several health codes, but it was consistent. Every morning, same taste, same temperature, same mild sense of, is this what's going to finally do me in? But the real reason I kept going back was Di, the waitress who worked the morning shift. She was probably in her mid-50s, had hair dyed an aggressive shade of red that nature never intended, and called everyone sweetheart in this way that somehow wasn't condescending. It was genuine. She'd refill your coffee without asking. Remember how you took it after the first visit? And she had this gift for knowing when someone wanted to chat and when they just wanted to be left alone with their eggs and existential crisis. Morning, sweetheart, she'd say. Coffee pot already in hand before I even sat down. The usual. The usual was 2 eggs over easy wheat toast. No butter because I was pretending to make healthy choices and hash browns that were crispy enough to use as a weapon if necessary. It cost $6.95, which in today's economy felt like I was getting away with robbery. You got it, Di. She'd pour the coffee, give me this knowing look that said she understood more than I was telling her, and move on to the next customer. No prying questions. No. So, what's your story? Interrogation, just acceptance. It was refreshing in a way I didn't know I needed. Working at Willow Creek Hardware turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to me. Not because it was glamorous, it definitely wasn't. Or because it paid well, it definitely didn't. But because it gave me something I'd been missing for years, competence. The feeling that I was good at something, and people recognized it. That's where I met Tommy. Tommy was a regular who came in at least 3 times a week, always needed something random, a specific size of washer, would stain in an exact shade, sandpaper in varying grits, and always had a story. He was a retired Marine, about 65, built like he could still do a 100 push-ups without breaking a sweat, and had this way of talking that was equal parts wisdom and absolute zero tolerance for nonsense. You knew? He asked the first time I helped him, sizing me up like he was determining whether I was worth his time. Started last week. You know anything? Or are you one of those kids who just points at the computer? Try me. He rattled off a list of items that would have sent most people running to find someone else. But I grabbed a card and started pulling exactly what he needed without having to look up a single thing. Toggle bolts 3/4 in zinc-plated wood screws. Number 8, 2 inches, a specific brand of wood glue that most people didn't even know existed. Tommy watched me work, nodded approvingly, and when I finished, he said, "You actually know what you're doing. That's rare. I fixed enough stuff in my life to know my way around a hardware store. Fix stuff or fix stuff that other people broke while pretending they knew what they were doing." I laughed. Actually laughed. Not the fake kind I perfected over years of being the good sport. Definitely more of the second one. That was the beginning of what I guess you'd call a friendship, though. Tommy would probably call it 2 guys who talk while one of them shops for hardware. He started timing his visits for when I was working. We'd talk about projects, tools, the idiots who came in asking for that thingy that holds the other thingy, and eventually life. It was Tommy who first said the thing that I'd been thinking but couldn't articulate. We were in all 7, fasteners and anchors. And he was telling me about his daughter's wedding, how he'd paid for the whole thing, walked her down the aisle, gave a speech that made everyone cry. The works. Best day of my life, he said, getting to be her dad. I must have made a face because he stopped mid-reach for a box of drywall anchors and looked at me. What's that look? Nothing. Just that sounds nice. But nothing. It's nice. Family stuff is nice. Tommy wasn't having it. He crossed his arms still holding the anchors and gave me that look that Marines probably give recruits when they're about to say something that's going to hurt, but needs to be heard anyway. Son, I've been coming to this hardware store for 15 years. I've seen a lot of employees come and go. Most of them are kids working summer jobs. Don't know a Phillips from a flathead. Barely look up from their phones. But you're different. You know what you're doing. You're good with people. And you look like someone kicked your dog, ran over your cat, and then came back to apologize. But the apology somehow made it worse. I opened my mouth to protest, but he held up a hand. I'm not asking for your life story, but I'm going to tell you something that took me way too long to learn. People who laugh at you aren't people who love you. They're just people who need an audience. I stood there in all 7, surrounded by fasteners and anchors, which felt deeply symbolic in a way I wasn't ready to unpack. And something in my chest cracked open. Not in a bad way, more like when you've had a knot in your back for years and someone finally hits the exact right spot and it releases. They gave me a mug for Father's Day, I said. And I don't know why I said it. It just came out. It said, "World's biggest disappointment." Tommy didn't laugh, didn't look shocked, just nodded slowly like I'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. "And you stuck around after that for a few hours." "Then I left." "Good. That's good." He grabbed his drywall anchors and started heading toward the checkout. Then he paused, turned back. "You know what the thing about disappointment is, Jack?" "What?" "It's not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of their expectations. And if their expectations were that you'd just take it, keep smiling, keep being their punching bag, then disappointing them is exactly what you should do, son. If they laughed at you, just remember clowns only entertain because they're miserable, too. Don't be their entertainment anymore." He paid for his stuff and left. And I stood there having what I can only describe as a spiritual awakening in the middle of a hardware store. The thing about rebuilding yourself is that you can't do it alone. I mean, you can try. Lots of people try, but it works better when you've got people in your corner who see you as something other than a project or a problem. Tommy became that person. So did Susan, my manager, who let me take extra shifts when I needed the money and didn't ask why. So did Melissa at the register, who snuck me free coffee from the break room and always had a joke ready when the day was dragging. Even Doy at Nora's Diner, who probably didn't even know my last name, became part of this weird little support system I didn't know I was building. She'd see me come and looking rough some mornings and would slide an extra piece of bacon onto my plate without charging me. Small gesture, huge impact. I started waking up earlier, started caring about things again. Started remembering that I used to be a person who had interests and hobbies before I became someone whose entire identity was wrapped up in being married to Lydia and trying desperately to be accepted by her kids. One morning at Norris, I was sitting in my usual booth, working through my usual breakfast when I saw something that made me stop mid-chew. At another booth across the diner, there was a dad with his kid. Couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. The kid handed him a card, one of those construction paper things that kids make at school with way too much glitter and drawings that look like abstract art. The dad opened it, read whatever was scrolled inside, and his whole face lit up. Then the kid launched himself across the table for a hug, nearly knocking over their orange juice in the process, and the dad caught him laughing. I watched them, and I felt I don't even know what I felt. It wasn't jealousy exactly. Maybe longing, grief for something I'd never really had. I played that role, showed up to recital, helped with homework, went to parent-teacher conferences, but I'd never gotten that hug, that genuine, unprompted "you're my person" hug. I didn't cry. Wasn't going to cry in the middle of Nora's Diner over my eggs and existential crisis. But I did add 3 extra sugars to my coffee that morning just so I'd taste something sweet, just so something would feel good, even if it was artificial and probably terrible for me. Progress isn't linear and healing doesn't happen all at once. But somewhere between the hardware store, Tommy's wisdom, extra bacon, and those mornings where I got to just exist without being someone's punchline, I started feeling like maybe, just maybe, I could be okay. Not happy. Not yet. But okay was a start. And okay, I was learning was more than I'd had in a long time. You know that saying about curiosity killing the cat? Well, nobody mentions that curiosity also makes you do incredibly stupid things at 2 o'clock in the morning while you're lying in a motel bed that smells like broken dreams and industrial cleaner. Unable to sleep because your neighbor has apparently decided that 2 a.m. is the perfect time to rearrange every piece of furniture they own. Repeatedly with enthusiasm, I've been doing pretty well, all things considered. I had my routine. I had my job. I had Tommy dropping wisdom bombs in the fasteners aisle and Doy slipping me extra bacon like she was running some kind of breakfast-based support group. I'd kept my phone off for the most part, only turning it on to check my bank account and make sure I hadn't accidentally overdraft buying Carl the Fly a proper funeral after he finally met his end courtesy of the window I'd left open. R.I.P. Carl, you were a real one. But that night, that stupid sleepless night, I made the mistake of turning on my phone and opening Facebook. Not my real account, mind you. I wasn't that dumb. No, I created what the kids call a burner account. Fake name, fake profile picture. I used some stock photo of a golden retriever because who's going to suspect a golden retriever of digital espionage and 0 friends? Just me, my fake dog identity, and my terrible decision-making skills. I typed Lydia's name into the search bar like I was defusing a bomb. Half hoping she'd made her profile private. Half knowing she absolutely hadn't because Lydia's relationship with social media was like a performance art piece titled, "Look How Perfect My Life Is." Her profile popped up immediately. Of course it did. Public, wide open. Might as well have had a neon sign that said, "Come watch me curate my existence." The cover photo was new. Her and the kids at some beach. Everyone in white linen like they were auditioning for a tourism commercial. Everyone looked happy. Everyone looked perfect. Everyone looked like they definitely hadn't emotionally destroyed someone and driven him to live in a motel where the ice machine sounded like it was dying. I scrolled through her recent posts and it was exactly what you'd expect. Inspirational quotes about strength and resilience overlaid on pictures of sunsets. Selfies with captions like "just vibing, sparkles and coffee and confidence, hot beverage, flexed biceps" that had racked up hundreds of likes from people who probably didn't know her well enough to realize that her confidence was built on a foundation of making other people feel small. There were brunch photos because of course there were brunch photos. Is it even a midlife crisis if you're not documenting your avocado toast? With hashtags like #Strong'em-stick-together and #healing and #living-my-best-life. The comments were full of her friends hyping her up. "You go, girl. Looking amazing. Proud of you for staying strong. Strong." That word kept coming up like she was the survivor here. Like she was the one who'd been through something traumatic and was bravely soldiering on. Not the woman who'd orchestrated my humiliation and then acted surprised when I had the audacity to remove myself from the situation. I kept scrolling, falling deeper into this rabbit hole of manufactured happiness. And that's when I noticed something weird. Actually, not weird, alarming, suspicious. The kind of thing that makes you sit up in bed and squint at your phone like maybe you're seeing it wrong. There were no pictures of Madison. None. Lydia's Instagram, because of course I checked that too. I was already in full stalker mode. Used to be basically a Madison fan page. Madison at soccer practice. Madison at debate club. Madison with her friends. Madison's honor roll certificate. Madison breathing. Every major life event. Every minor achievement. Every single moment of that girl's existence had been documented and hashtagged and posted for the world to see. But now nothing. Not for the past month and a half. The last post featuring Madison was from early June, right before Father's Day, actually, and it was some generic "so proud of my girl" caption with a picture from her junior year awards ceremony. After that, radio silence. Just Lydia. Lydia at brunch. Lydia with her wine night girls. Lydia looking pensively out windows like she was in a music video about overcoming adversity. But no Madison. Eli showed up occasionally in the background of photos, usually on his phone, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, which honestly relatable. But Madison, it was like she'd been scrubbed from the record, like Lydia had gone through and edited her out of the narrative. Now, I'm not a detective. My investigative skills peaked at finding the TV remote when it's wedged between couch cushions. But even I knew this meant something. This meant something was off because Lydia didn't just stop posting about her golden child for no reason. Madison was her pride and joy, her greatest accomplishment, the living proof that she was an amazing mother who'd raised an exceptional human being. So, where was she? I spent the next 2 hours. Yes, 2 full hours. I'm not proud of it, going through Lydia's friends list, clicking on profiles, looking for any mention of Madison. Most of them had private profiles, which was incredibly frustrating, but a few were public, and I found fragments. Clues, digital breadcrumbs. Lydia's sister Diane had posted something cryptic 3 weeks ago. Sometimes the hardest part of parenting is letting them learn lessons the hard way. Praying for peace in our family, folded hands with a bunch of comments from people asking if everything was okay, which Diane never answered. Her friend Sandra from Pilates. The same Sandra who'd commented "praying for you huning husband" post had shared an article about when your teen makes choices you don't agree with no caption, but Lydia had commented "read hard and so needed this today." And then there was the smoking gun buried in a comment thread on one of Lydia's brunch photos from 2 weeks ago. Someone named Jennifer didn't recognize her. Probably a work friend had written, "Glad you're taking time for yourself. You deserve it after everything with them. Call me if you need to talk." Everything with M. M as in Madison. Everything with Madison. What the hell did that mean? What had happened? Had she run away, gotten into trouble? Joined a cult, started a punk band? The possibilities were endless. And my caffeine and curiosity-fueled brain was running through all of them at warp speed. I sat there in that motel room. The glow of my phone screamed the only light, and I felt this weird mix of emotions. Concern, definitely, because whatever had happened, Madison was still technically my stepdaughter. And despite the whole world's biggest disappointment mug incident, I didn't wish bad things on her. Curiosity, obviously, because I'm human and humans are nosy creatures who can't resist a mystery. But also, and I'm not proud of this, a little bit of satisfaction. Not satisfaction that something bad might have happened to Madison. I'm not a monster. But satisfaction that maybe, just maybe, Lydia's perfect little world wasn't quite as perfect as she was presenting it online. That maybe the woman who'd spent years making me feel inadequate was dealing with her own inadequacies. That maybe karma was real and it had an Instagram account. I know. That makes me sound petty and vindictive. And maybe I was being petty and vindictive. But you try being emotionally demolished by your family and then watching them play happy on social media while pretending you never existed. See how zen and enlightened you feel about it. I clicked on Madison's profile next because I'd already given up on having any dignity. Her last post was from 2 months ago. A selfie with some caption about summer plans and freedom. The comments were typical teenager stuff. Friends hyping her up, some emojis, nothing that screamed family crisis imminent. But she hadn't posted since. And for an 18-year-old who used to post at least once a day, that was weird. That was very weird. I thought about messaging her. Actually typed out a message. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. But I deleted it before sending because what was I going to say? Hi, I'm your mom's ex-husband who left without saying goodbye and is now internet stalking you from a fake dog account at 2 o'clock in the morning. Just wanted to see if you're alive. Yeah, that would go over great. Instead, I bookmarked Lydia's profile and told myself I'd check it periodically. Not every day. That would be obsessive, just occasionally, to make sure everyone was alive and not doing anything that required calling the authorities. Totally normal, totally healthy behavior. The sun was starting to come up by the time I finally put my phone down. My neighbor had stopped moving furniture around, probably exhausted from whatever the hell they'd been doing for the past 4 hours. Carl's successor, I'd named him Carl Jr., was buzzing around the lamp, and I could hear the highway starting to pick up with morning traffic. I had work in 3 hours. I needed to sleep, but my brain was doing that thing where it grabs onto a mystery and won't let go, like a dog with a bone, running through every possible scenario. Maybe Madison had gotten in trouble at school. Maybe she'd gotten pregnant, though. God, I hope not. That would be a nightmare. Maybe she'd just decided she was tired of being Lydia's performing monkey and had asked for some privacy. Maybe she'd gone to stay with her biological father, though Lydia never talked about him, which usually meant the situation there was complicated. Or maybe, and this was the thought that kept circling back, maybe Madison had realized what I'd realized, that living in that house, being part of that family dynamic, was slowly killing whatever authentic self you had. Maybe she'd left, too. The irony wouldn't be lost on Lydia if that was the case. Spend years curating this image of the perfect blended family. Give your husband a mug that says he's a disappointment. Watch him leave, then have your daughter follow suit. It would be like a Greek tragedy if Greek tragedies were set in suburban America and involved social media. I finally fell asleep around 6:30, still holding my phone, still wondering. And when I woke up 2 hours later for work, groggy and unrest, the first thing I did was check Lydia's Facebook again. New post, picture of her morning coffee with the caption, "New day, new blessings. Grateful for growth and change, seedling son." 43 likes already. 0 mentions of where her daughter was. And just like that, I realized something. Lydia's life on social media was a fairy tale. Carefully edited, strategically posted, designed to make everyone believe in the happily ever after. But I'd lived in that story. I knew what happened behind the scenes when the camera was off. And fairy tales, I was learning, were just pretty lies we told ourselves to avoid dealing with the truth. Guilt is a funny thing. Not ha-ha funny. More like wake up in a cold sweat at 3 o'clock in the morning wondering if you're actually a terrible person funny. The kind of funny that isn't funny at all and makes you question every decision you've ever made while staring at a water stain on the ceiling that looks disturbingly like a judge's gavel. I'd been gone for almost 2 months. 2 months of living at the Silver Rest Inn, which I'd somehow managed to make feel almost livable. I'd bought an air freshener that made the place smell like mountain fresh instead of despair and mildew. And I'd finally won the war against the roaches by leaving out strategic traps like I was some kind of extermination general. 2 months of working at Willow Creek Hardware, building up a modest savings account that was mine and mine alone. 2 months of actually feeling like a person instead of a punchline. But in all that time, through all those small victories and moments of, hey, maybe I'm not completely broken, there was this one thing nagging at me like a splinter you can't quite reach. One person I'd left behind who didn't deserve it. Eli, my stepson. The quiet one. The kid who'd filmed my Father's Day humiliation, but had at least looked uncomfortable about it. The one who never really joined in on the jokes. Never piled on when Lydia and Madison were on a roll. He just existed in the background like a stagehand in a play he never auditioned for. I'd been so focused on getting away from Lydia and Madison. So wrapped up in my own pain and the need to escape that I'd never stopped to think about how it would affect him. And that's the thing about being the bigger person or trying to be anyway. You eventually have to face the fact that your pain doesn't exist in a vacuum. It splashes. It spreads. It hits people who were just standing nearby. Eli wasn't the one who'd hurt me. Sure, he'd been there. He'd held the camera, but I knew him well enough to know he'd probably been told it was just a harmless prank. That I'd think it was funny, that it was all in good fun. And when you're 16 and your mom is telling you something, you tend to believe her, even when your gut is saying something else entirely. So, one night, after a particularly long shift at the hardware store, where I'd helped this elderly woman find the exact right screws to fix her late husband's birdhouse, and she'd gotten teary-eyed and thanked me like I'd saved her life. I went back to my motel room and did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter, an actual physical pen and paper letter. Not a text, not an email, not a Facebook message from my fake golden retriever account. A real letter, because some things deserve the weight of ink on paper. The permanence of words you can hold in your hands. I sat at the tiny desk in my room, right next to the window where Carl Jr. liked to hang out, with a pad of paper I'd bought from the dollar store and a pen I'd stolen from the hardware store. Sorry, Susan. And I started writing. The first draft was terrible, too angry, too much about me and not enough about him. I crumpled it up and threw it at the trash can, missed by about 3 feet, and started again. The second draft was too casual, like I was writing to a buddy instead of a kid I'd helped raise for 3 years. Crumpled, tossed, missed again. My hand-eye coordination really suffered during my time in that motel. The third draft felt right. Or at least as right as this kind of thing could feel. Hey bud, it started, because that's what I'd always called him. Not son. That felt presumptuous, like I was trying to replace someone I'd never even met. Just bud. Simple. Honest. I'm okay. I know you're probably wondering where I went. Or maybe you're not. I don't really know what your mom told you about all this, but I wanted you to hear it from me. So here it is. I didn't leave because of you. I need you to know that whatever happened, whatever you've heard, this wasn't about you. Sometimes adults need to step away to find their peace. That sounds like something you'd read on a motivational poster with a picture of a sunset. And I know it's kind of vague and probably frustrating to hear, but the truth is complicated. And you're smart enough to know that life isn't as simple as good guys and bad guys. I'm not going to badmouth your mom. That's not what this is about. But I also can't pretend that everything was okay when it wasn't. I stayed as long as I could, tried as hard as I could, and eventually I had to choose between being there and being okay. I chose being okay. I hope someday you understand that. You're a good kid, Eli. Quiet, but good. You've got this way of seeing things that most people miss because they're too busy talking. Don't lose that. The world needs more people who pay attention. If you ever want to talk about anything, about nothing, about this whole mess, or just about life in general, I'm around. I'm staying in Willow Creek, working at the hardware store on Main Street. But more than that, I'll be at the Willow Creek Library on Saturday at 3:00 p.m. just sitting there, probably reading something boring about home improvement or how to fix things that are actually unfixable. If you show up, great. If you don't, I understand. No pressure, no expectations, just an open door if you want to walk through it. Take care of yourself, bud. And remember, you're not responsible for other people's happiness. Not mine, not your mom's, not your sister's, just your own. Jack. I read it over about 15 times, changing a word here and there, second-guessing every sentence. Was it too much, not enough? Would he even get it, or would Lydia intercept it and throw it away? Would he think I was pathetic for reaching out? Would he crumple it up and toss it without reading the same way I toss my failed drafts? But eventually, I had to just commit. I folded the letter, put it in an envelope I'd also bought from the dollar store, white, plain, nothing fancy, and wrote his name on the front. Just L, not his last name, not the full address on the front, because I was going to hand-deliver this thing. Well, not hand-deliver directly. I wasn't ready for a face-to-face confrontation with Lydia at the front door, but I knew Eli's schedule. Kid was a creature of habit, just like me. Every Thursday, he stayed after school for computer club until 5, then walked home because he said he liked the exercise, but really I think he just liked having an excuse to put on headphones and avoid human interaction for 20 minutes. So that Thursday, I drove to his school, felt incredibly creepy doing it, like I was some kind of stalker, but I pushed through and I waited in the parking lot until I saw him come out. He was by himself, headphones in, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking at his phone like it held the secrets of the universe. I got out of my truck, heart pounding like I was about to rob a bank instead of just giving a kid a letter. Elliot. He looked up and I watched his face cycle through about 17 emotions in 3 seconds. Surprise, confusion, relief, maybe. Or maybe I was projecting. Then something that looked like weariness, like he wasn't sure if he should be happy to see me or worried. Jack. He pulled out his headphones, glanced around like he was checking if anyone was watching. What are you doing here? I wanted to give you this. I held out the envelope, suddenly very aware of how ridiculous this whole thing was. A grown man lurking in a high school parking lot, handing out letters like it was 1952 and we didn't have phones. I know it's weird. This whole thing is weird, but I didn't have your number and I didn't want to contact you through your mom. So, yeah. Letter. He took it slowly like he thought it might explode. Is everything okay? Are you okay? I'm fine. Better, actually. I stopped because how do you explain to a 16-year-old that you're not mad at him, but you couldn't stay in a house that was slowly destroying you? Read the letter. It explains everything or tries to anyway. He held the envelope, turning it over in his hands. Mom said you just left, that you didn't say anything to anyone. That's true. I did, and I'm sorry for that. You deserved better, Madison said. He stopped, bit his lip, looked away. What did Madison say? Nothing. Never mind. But his jaw was tight, and I could see he was holding something back. Eli, whatever she said, whatever anyone said, you can talk to me. I know I left and I know that probably looks bad, but I'm still here if you need me. He nodded but didn't say anything else. Just stood there clutching the letter and I realized I'd done what I came to do. The ball was in his court now. He could read it or throw it away. He could show up on Saturday or not. I couldn't control that. I could only control my part. Saturday, I said 3 p.m. library if you want. Okay. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was an okay, which in teenager language could mean absolutely anything. I got back in my truck and drove away, watching him in the rearview mirror as he stood there in that parking lot, staring at the envelope like it was a puzzle he hadn't figured out how to solve yet. Saturday came. I showed up at the Willow Creek Library at 2:30 because I'm the kind of person who shows up early to everything, even potentially life-changing meetings with my orang stepson. The library was one of those small-town libraries that felt like someone's grandmother's house. Lots of wood paneling. The smell of old books mixed with coffee from the little cafe in the corner. Big windows that let in too much light for proper dramatic brooding. I found a table near the back away from the kids section where some poor librarian was trying to manage story time while toddlers ran around like they'd been fed pure sugar. And I sat down with a book I'd grabbed randomly from the shelf. Something about woodworking. Didn't matter. I wasn't reading it anyway. I was watching the door. 3 o'clock came. Then 3:05, 3:10. By 3:15, I'd accepted that he wasn't coming. And I was trying to figure out if I felt relieved or devastated. Maybe both. Maybe that was okay. Then at 3:17, the door opened and there he was, taller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just forgotten. Nervous, clutching his backpack like it was a shield, looking around the library like he was checking for snipers. Our eyes met. And then he said so quietly I almost missed it. Dad. Not Jack. Not hey. Dad. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that word until it hit me square in the chest like a fastball I wasn't ready for. Hey bud. I stood up. Wasn't sure if I should hug him or shake his hand or just stand there like an idiot. You came? Yeah. He walked over, still cautious, still not quite sure what this was. I read your letter like 15 times and I think we should talk. So, we sat and we talked and for the first time in months, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I hadn't destroyed everything after all. There's this moment when you're rebuilding your life somewhere between living in a motel with roaches and actually having your crap together where things start clicking into place so naturally that you almost don't notice it's happening. It's not dramatic. There's no montage with inspirational music. It's just Tuesday and then suddenly Tuesday doesn't feel like you're drowning anymore. That's where I was at 3 months after leaving. 3 months of small victories that added up to something that felt suspiciously like progress. The meeting with Eli had cracked something open in me. Not in a now everything's fixed way because life isn't a Hallmark movie and one conversation doesn't solve years of dysfunction, but it reminded me that I wasn't just some walking disaster who'd failed at being part of a family. I was a person who'd mattered to someone. Still mattered. That counted for something. We started meeting every other Saturday at the library. Sometimes we talk about serious stuff, how he was doing, what life was like at home with Lydia and Madison. Though he was always careful not to say too much, still trying to be loyal to his mom while also being honest with me. Other times we just talk about normal stuff, school, the video games he was playing. This girl he liked but was too nervous to talk to. I gave him terrible advice about that. By the way, My track record with relationships wasn't exactly stellar, but those meetings, they were my anchor. Proof that I hadn't completely screwed everything up. Proof that leaving didn't mean I had to lose everyone. Work at Willow Creek Hardware was going better than I'd expected too. I'd gotten a small raise. Only 50 cents more an hour, but when you're living on a tight budget, 50 cents feels like winning the lottery. Susan, my manager, had started giving me more responsibility, ordering inventory, training new employees, basically running the place when she wasn't there. "You're good at this," she told me one afternoon while we were doing inventory in the back room, counting boxes of nails like we were archaeologists cataloging ancient artifacts. "Better than good, actually. You ever think about managing your own place?" "Not really. I'm just trying to keep my head above water right now." "Well, when you're ready to do more than tread water, let me know. You've got a knack for this. And people like you. That's rare." People liked me. What a concept. At the house, I'd stopped calling it home in my head. I'd been tolerated at best. But here, people actually sought me out, asked for my advice, remembered my name. It was wild. And then there was Tommy. Still coming in 3 times a week, still dropping wisdom like he was getting paid for it. We'd graduated from just talking in the aisles to occasionally grabbing coffee after my shift at this place down the street that served coffee that didn't taste like it had been filtered through a gym sock. "You seem different," he said one day, stirring sugar into his coffee with the intensity of someone performing surgery. "Less like a kicked puppy, more like a guy who's got his feet under him." "I bought a pickup truck," I said, like that explained everything. And in a way, it did. I'd saved up enough to buy a used Ford F-150 from a guy on Craigslist. It was 12 years old, had a dent in the passenger side door, and the radio only worked intermittently, but it was mine. Fully paid for. No car payments, no strings attached, just me and my slightly beat up truck. A truck? That's good. That's real good. What are you going to do with it? I don't know. Haul stuff, I guess. Whatever people with trucks do. Tommy laughed. You should put that entrepreneurial spirit to work. You know how to fix things. You've got a truck. You know what that makes you employed, a handyman, start your own business, advertise on Facebook, or whatever you kids do these days. Jack's Repairs or something. People always need stuff fixed, and most of the people doing it are either too expensive or complete idiots. I laughed it off at first, but the idea stuck with me like gum on a shoe. A handyman business. My own thing. No boss except myself. No wife telling me I was doing it wrong. Just me, my skills, and people who actually wanted my help. So, I did something crazy. Well, crazy for me. I started a YouTube channel. I know. YouTube. Really? Every middle-aged guy going through a crisis thinks he's going to become a YouTuber and get rich making videos about whatever boring hobby he's into. I wasn't delusional enough to think I'd become famous or make millions, but I figured if nothing else, it would be a portfolio. Proof that I knew what I was talking about. I called it Handy Truths because I'm apparently terrible at naming things, but also because I wanted it to be honest. No BS, no pretending that every project goes perfectly. Just real talk about tools, repairs, and the disasters that happen when you think you know what you're doing, but actually don't. My first video was filmed on my phone, propped up on a stack of books in my motel room, and it was about the different types of screwdrivers and when to use them. Riveting content, I know. I expected maybe 12 views, mostly from bots and my own mother if she still remembered I existed. But I made it funny or tried to. Anyway, I used the same sarcastic humor that had kept me sane through years of being the family joke, except this time I was in on it. I was the one making the jokes. "This is a Phillips head screwdriver," I said, holding it up to the camera. Named after Henry Phillips, who invented it in the 1930s and probably never imagined that 90 years later a guy living in a motel would be explaining it to strangers on the internet. If you want a drill that'll die faster than your enthusiasm for marriage, don't buy this one. I posted it at midnight on a Tuesday because I was too nervous to post it during normal hours when people might actually see it. Then I turned off my phone and tried to sleep. Already regretting everything. The next morning I checked. 53 views, 12 likes, 3 comments. This is actually helpful. Thanks. Subscribed. More please. Finally, someone who doesn't talk like a robot. Keep it up, dude. I made another video, then another reviews of tools I'd used at work. Tutorials on basic home repairs. A particularly unhinged rant about why people needed to stop using duct tape for everything. Because duct tape is not a universal solution, Karen, despite what your Pinterest board says. That one went viral. Well, viral by my standards. 20,000 views in a week. Comments pouring in from people who either thought I was hilarious or were deeply offended that I'd insulted their duct tape usage. Either way, they were watching. Companies started emailing me. Small ones at first. Brands I'd never heard of asking if I'd review their products. They'd send me free stuff and I'd make a video about whether it was worth buying. I was honest, sometimes brutally so, and people seemed to appreciate that. In a world full of influencers who'd say anything was amazing if someone paid them enough, I was the guy who'd tell you if something sucked. This drill costs $49 and claims it can handle any job around the house. That's a lie. I used it to hang 3 pictures and it started smoking. Not metaphorically smoking like it was cool and impressive. Actually smoking like it was about to catch fire and burn down my motel room. 0 stars. Don't buy this. The views kept climbing. Hundreds became thousands. Thousands became tens of thousands. My subscriber count hit 5,000, then 10,000. Companies I'd actually heard of started reaching out. Sponsorship offers. Not enough to quit my day job, but enough to move out of the Silver Rest Inn and into an actual apartment. Not a nice apartment. Let's not get crazy here, but a 1-bedroom place above a pizza shop in downtown Willow Creek that smelled like pepperoni and possibilities. It had a real kitchen, a bathroom where the tiles were actually white, a bedroom that didn't come with complimentary roaches. I signed the lease, and felt like I just bought a mansion. Tommy helped me move, which was easy because I barely had anything. My 2 shirts had become 6 shirts. I bought a real bed frame instead of just a mattress on the floor. Got a desk for editing videos. A bookshelf that was mostly empty, but made me feel like an adult who had their life together. Look at you, Tommy said, surveying my new place with approval. From motel to apartment, from walking disaster to minor internet celebrity. What's next? Writing a book about your journey. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm serious, Jack. You've done something here. You took a garbage situation and turned it into something. Most people just stay in the garbage and complain. You climbed out. I wanted to argue with him to say it wasn't that impressive, that I was still figuring things out and probably 1 bad month away from being back in a motel. But standing there in my new apartment, small and smelling like pizza. But mine, I couldn't because he was right. I had done something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was actually living. The YouTube channel kept growing. I posted twice a week, every week, and people kept watching. The money started trickling in. Ad revenue, sponsorships, affiliate links. It wasn't quit your day job money yet, but it was pay your rent and eat something besides ramen money. It was freedom money. For the first time since I'd walked out of that house with a duffel bag and my dignity in tatters, I felt like I wasn't running away from something. I was running towards something, building something, becoming someone who wasn't defined by being Lydia's husband or Madison's stepdad or the guy from the disappointing mug. I was just Jack Harris. Guy who knew too much about hardware. Guy who made videos that people actually wanted to watch. Guy who'd been knocked down but got back up and dusted himself off and said, "Okay, what's next?" And the voice that had been mocked for being boring, the one Lydia and Madison had laughed at, that voice was now paying my bills. Funny how that worked out. One night, I was editing a video in my new apartment when my phone buzzed. A message from Eli. "Saw your latest video. Mom saw it, too. She's pissed." I smiled. Then I kept editing because the best revenge isn't getting even. It's not stooping to their level or playing their games. The best revenge is thriving so loud they can't stand the noise. And I was just getting started. You know what nobody tells you about success? Even small modest I can finally afford name brand cereal success. It makes you paranoid. Not in a tinfoil hat the government is watching kind of way, but in a I've built something in them terrified someone's going to take it away kind of way. And when that someone is your harangued wife who has a law degree she never uses but definitely knows how to weaponize when it suits her purposes. Yeah, the paranoia feels pretty justified. It started with a comment Eli made during one of our Saturday library sessions. We were sitting in our usual spot. I'd basically claimed this corner table as my own at this point, and the librarians knew me by name, and he was telling me about his college application essays when he just casually dropped this bomb. "Mom's been asking about you a lot lately." I looked up from the coffee I brought from Nora's diner. Du had started giving me a to-go cup when she saw me heading toward the library. Bless her heart. Asking what? Just where you're living, what you're doing, if you have a job. He shifted uncomfortably, picking at a loose thread on his backpack. She's been weird about it. Like more interested than she should be, you know. How interested are we talking? Mildly curious, interested, or consulting with lawyers? Interested? I don't know. Maybe somewhere in the middle. She saw one of your YouTube videos. The one about the circular saw. Oh, The circular saw video. That one had done particularly well, almost 50,000 views. I'd reviewed 3 different models, roasted 2 of them mercilessly, and the third one I'd actually recommended. The recommended one sales had apparently spiked after my video, and the company had sent me a thank you email along with a check that made me genuinely excited about a piece of paper. And what did she say about it? Eli looked even more uncomfortable, which was saying something because the kid's baseline was mildly uncomfortable with existence. She said, "It's interesting that you have money for video equipment, but apparently didn't have money for the family." There it was, the narrative. I could see it forming like storm clouds on the horizon. Jack, the deadbeat, who abandoned his family and is now living it up, making YouTube videos while his poor wife struggles to keep things together. Never mind that the video equipment was my iPhone propped on a stack of books. Never mind that every dollar I'd made I'd earned myself after leaving. Never mind that I'd paid every bill, every mortgage payment, every single expense for that family right up until the day I left. But facts didn't matter when someone was building a story. And Lydia was excellent at building stories. Eli, I need you to be honest with me. Do you think your mom is going to try to come after me for money? He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. I don't know. Maybe she's been talking to Aunt Diane a lot. And you know how Aunt Diane gets. Oh, I knew Diane was Lydia's older sister, a corporate lawyer who viewed every interaction as a potential lawsuit waiting to happen. She'd never liked me. I was too blue-collar, too unambitious, too settling for mediocre in her expert opinion. The fact that her own marriage had imploded spectacularly 3 years ago didn't seem to factor into her relationship advice at all. I drove home that day with my mind racing. I'd been so focused on building something, on moving forward, that I hadn't thought about protecting what I was building. And that was stupid. That was incredibly, monumentally stupid. So, I did what any reasonable person who's mildly paranoid and has trust issues would do. I called an accountant. Not just any accountant, my buddy Rick from high school. We'd lost touch over the years, but reconnected randomly when he came into the hardware store looking for some specific type of bolt for a project and recognized me. We'd grabbed a beer, caught up, and I'd learned he now ran his own accounting firm in the next town over. "Rick, it's Jack." "Jack Harris?" "Yeah, from the hardware store. Listen, I need your professional help with something, and I'm willing to pay your full rate, so don't give me any friends and family discount BS." We met at his office the next day. Rick's office was exactly what you'd expect from an accountant. Lots of gray, some motivational posters about fiscal responsibility, and a desk so organized it made me feel like my life was chaos incarnate just by comparison. "So," Rick said, leaning back in his chair with his hands folded like he was about to deliver news about a terminal illness. "You want to protect your assets from your wife, soon-to-be ex-wife. And yeah, is that bad? That feels like it should be bad, but also it feels like common sense. It's not bad, it's smart, especially if you think she's going to come after you. Tell me what you've got." I laid it all out. The YouTube channel that was making decent money, not buy a yacht, money, but pay rent and groceries without having a panic attack. Money, the small but growing savings account, the truck I'd bought outright, the tools I'd accumulated, the sponsorship deals that were starting to come in. "And you left how many months ago?" 4.5. "Have you filed for divorce?" "No. I probably should have, but I've been, I don't know, avoiding it, hoping it would just resolve itself somehow." Rick gave me the look that professionals give when you've said something incredibly dumb, but they're too polite to say it directly. "Jack, buddy, you need to file. Like yesterday, the longer you wait, the more complicated this gets, but in the meantime, yeah, we can set up some protection." He explained it all to me. Business trusts, asset protection, separating personal and business finances. It made my head hurt. Honestly, I was a guy who knew which screwdriver to use for which job. Legal and financial structures were not my forte. "Here's what I recommend," Rick said, pulling up something on his computer. "We set up an LLC for your YouTube business. Handy Truths LLC. You put everything related to the channel under that. We also set up a trust for any major assets, the truck, savings beyond what you need for basic living expenses, any equipment, and we make sure everything is properly documented from here on out. And that protects it if Lydia tries to claim she's entitled to half. It makes it significantly harder for her to claim she's entitled to half of something you built entirely after you separated. You're not hiding assets. That's illegal and stupid. You're just organizing them properly. If she wants to fight about it, let her. But you'll have all your ducks in a row." We spent the next 2 hours setting everything up. Paperwork, signatures, discussions about tax implications that made me want to take a nap, but by the end of it, I felt better. Not completely secure. You're never completely secure when dealing with someone who views conflict as a competitive sport, but better. One more thing, Rick said as I was getting ready to leave the trust. You should name a beneficiary. Someone who gets it if something happens to you. I didn't even hesitate. Eli, my stepson, not your biological son? No, but he's the only one who showed up when it mattered. That counts for something. Rick nodded and made a note. Divorce prep. Nah. Emotional bankruptcy recovery. He laughed, but it wasn't really a joke. That's exactly what it was. Recovering from the emotional bankruptcy of giving everything to people who gave nothing back. A week later, I took another step. I'd been putting off. I hired a lawyer. Not a big expensive shark in a suit lawyer. I couldn't afford that, but a lawyer nonetheless. A woman named Jill who specialized in what her website called asset protection for complex family situations, which I figured was lawyer speak for when your spouse is going to make your life hell. Jill's office was above a sandwich shop and smelled like pastrami and legal documents. She was probably in her mid-40s, had reading glasses on a chain around her neck like somebody's cool aunt, and had this direct way of talking that I appreciated immediately. So, you left your wife after she gave you a mug that said you were a disappointment. You've been gone for months. You haven't filed for divorce. You've started a successful YouTube channel, and now you think she's going to come after you for money. Did I get all that right? When you say it like that, it sounds like a really weird country song. Most divorces are weird country songs. That's why I have a job. Here's my advice. And you're paying for this advice. So listen carefully. File for divorce now. Don't wait for her to file. You file first. You control the narrative. You also establish clearly that anything you've earned since leaving is separate property. But we're still legally married. Yes, but you've been separated. If you can prove you've been living separately, supporting yourself, not commingling finances, the court will generally consider assets acquired during separation to be separate property. Generally, nothing's guaranteed, but you've got a better shot if you're proactive. And what if she fights it? Jill smiled, and it was the kind of smile that suggested she'd seen some stuff in her career, some really messy stuff, then she fights it. But here's the thing about people who try to take what isn't theirs. They usually show their ass in the process. Courts don't like spite. They don't like greed disguised as fairness. If she comes after you for assets you earned after leaving, assets you built from nothing while living in a motel, most judges are going to see through that. So, what do? You document everything. Every dollar you earn, where it comes from, where it goes, every video you make, every sponsorship deal, every expense, you keep it all separate from anything joint. You don't give her ammunition. And most importantly, she leaned forward, glasses sliding down her nose. You thrive. You succeed so loudly, so obviously, so undeniably that when people look at the situation, they don't see a man who abandoned his family. They see a man who left a toxic situation and built something better. I like Jill. I liked her a lot. Sometimes the best revenge, she continued, is thriving so loud they can't stand the noise. And from what you've told me, you're already doing that. Keep doing it. Just do it with proper legal protection. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Prepared, not scared, not reactive, prepared. I had an accountant, a lawyer, a plan. I had documentation and structures and all the boring adult stuff that nobody tells you matters until it suddenly matters a lot. That night, I sat in my apartment above the pizza shop editing my latest video. A comparison of different types of wood stain that was somehow getting decent views. And I thought about how far I'd come. For months ago, I was sleeping on a sagging mattress in a roach-infested motel, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Now, I had an apartment, a business, a plan, a lawyer who understood that sometimes leaving isn't giving up, it's survival. An accountant who made sure I wasn't going to lose everything I'd built. And most importantly, I had something they couldn't take away from me. Proof that I wasn't the disappointment they'd labeled me as. I was just disappointed in them. And I was done letting that define me. The mug sat on my desk holding pins now instead of pain. Every time I looked at it, I smiled. They'd thought they were breaking me. But all they'd really done was set me free. And now I was making damn sure nobody could cage me again. Social media is a beautiful thing when you want to keep tabs on people without actually talking to them. It's like having a window into someone's life, except they're deliberately staging everything in that window to make you think their life is perfect. And if you're petty enough, which let's be honest, I absolutely was, you can use that window to figure out exactly when to make your grand reappearance. That's how I found out about Madison's graduation party. I was scrolling through Facebook on my fake golden retriever account. Yes, I still had it. Don't judge me. When I saw the post, Big announcement from Lydia, complete with one of those custom graphic designs that look like someone paid money on Etsy to make it look fancy. Graduation celebration. Join us in celebrating Madison's achievement. Saturday, June 15th, 2 to 6 p.m. Food, music, and memories. Open house. All are welcome. Graduation cap party popper. All are welcome. That was the phrase that got me. All are welcome. I wondered if that all included the husband she'd emotionally demolished and then reported missing on Facebook like I was a lost dog. Probably not. But technically, she'd said all were welcome. And I'm a big believer in taking people at their word. Plus, I had some things I needed to say, some closure I needed to get. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted them to see what I'd become. Not the broken guy who'd left with a duffel bag and a destroyed sense of self-worth. The guy who'd rebuilt himself into something better. So, I marked it on my calendar. June 15th, Madison's graduation party. The day I'd make my return. I told Tommy about it over coffee 2 days before the party. He looked at me like I just announced I was planning to skydive without a parachute. You're going to do what now? I'm going to the party just to make an appearance. Say congratulations. Be civil, Jack. Buddy, that's a terrible idea. Probably, but I'm doing it anyway. Why? What's the point? You've moved on. You've got your life together. Why go back there? I thought about it, stirring sugar into my coffee that didn't need any more sugar because they need to see that they didn't break me. Because Madison's graduating and despite everything, I helped raise that kid for 3 years because I want them to know that I'm not hiding. I'm not ashamed. I left and I'm fine. Better than fine. Tommy sighed. The kind of sigh that said he knew he wasn't going to talk me out of this. At least don't go alone. You want backup? Nah, this is something I need to do myself, but I appreciate the offer. You're either brave or stupid, and I haven't figured out which yet. Can it be both? Saturday arrived with perfect weather, sunny, not too hot. The kind of day that made you believe good things were possible. I put on my best jeans, a button-up shirt that I'd actually ironed, and boots that I'd cleaned until they looked almost new. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the guy staring back, confident, put together, not the defeated man who'd shuffled out 4 months ago. The house, God, I still thought of it as the house. Even though I'd paid the mortgage for 3 years, looked exactly the same from the outside. Same beige siding, same mailbox I'd installed, same driveway where I'd taught Madison to parallel park, and she'd nearly taken out the neighbor's trash cans. There was a big tent in the backyard. I could hear music playing, people laughing, the sound of a party in full swing. For a second, I almost turned around, almost got back in my truck and drove away. This was stupid. This was asking for trouble. But then I remembered the mug. I remembered Lydia's Facebook post about me being missing. I remembered every joke at my expense. Every time I'd smiled and pretended it didn't hurt. I walked up the driveway like I owned the place because technically legally I still half own the place. That was a conversation for the lawyers, but for now it gave me the confidence to walk through that gate into the backyard like I belong there. The party stopped. Not immediately, not dramatically, but like someone had slowly turned down the volume on everything. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Someone dropped a plastic cup. The music kept playing. Some pop song I didn't recognize. But suddenly it felt too loud. Lydia was standing near the drinks table, wine glass halfway to her lips, frozen like someone had hit pause on her life. Her face went through this incredible journey of emotions. Surprise, confusion, anger, panic, and finally landing on something that looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon. Madison was by the cake table wearing a blue dress and a graduation cap that said done in glitter letters. She went pale, actually pale, like she'd seen a ghost, which I guess in a way she had. But Eli was sitting at one of those rented tables with some friends. And when he saw me, his whole face lit up. He stood, started walking toward me, and that was all the confirmation I needed that I'd made the right choice. Jack. Lydia's voice cut through the awkward silence like a knife through butter. What are you doing here? I smiled. Calm. Easy. Like I just stopped by to borrow a cup of sugar. Just dropping by to say congratulations. It is an open house, right? All are welcome. I could see her brain working trying to figure out how to handle this. She couldn't make a scene. Not in front of all these people. Not at Madison's party. But she also clearly wanted me gone. You can't just show up here. Actually, I can, I said, still smiling. I'm still legally owner of this property, and you did post that all were welcome. But don't worry, I'm not staying long. Eli reached me then, and he didn't hesitate. Just wrapped me in a hug right there in front of everyone. I'm glad you came. Me, too, bud. I turned to Madison, who was still standing by the cake like a deer in headlights. I walked over, pulled a small wrapped box from my pocket. I prepared this because I'm not a complete monster and held it out to her. Congratulations on graduating. I know things are complicated, but I did help raise you for 3 years. That has to count for something. She took the box slowly like she thought it might explode. What is it? Open it. She unwrapped it carefully while everyone watched. Inside was a small compact mirror. Nothing fancy, just a simple mirror in a nice case. What's this for? I looked her right in the eyes. For self-reflection. Try it sometime. You might learn something. The crowd, and there was definitely a crowd now. Everyone had stopped pretending they weren't watching. Made this collective gasp sound. That thing you hear in movies when someone says something shocking. Lydia's face went from pale to red. How dare you? How dare I? What? Show up and give your daughter a graduation gift? Be civil. Exist. I turned to face her fully now, and I wasn't smiling anymore. You posted on Facebook that I was missing. You told everyone I'd abandoned my family. But the truth is, I left because staying was slowly killing me. And the fact that you never once considered that maybe, just maybe, giving someone a mug that says they're a disappointment on Father's Day might be hurtful, that says everything about why I left. It was a joke. Jokes are supposed to be funny, Lydia. That was just cruel dressed up as humor. People were pulling out phones now. Of course they were. This was going to be all over social media by tonight. Part of me should have cared, but honestly, I was done caring what people thought. I didn't come here to cause a scene, I said, my voice calmer now. I came to say congratulations to Madison, to show Eli that I'm still here for him, and to prove to myself that I'm not afraid of you anymore. Mission accomplished. I started walking toward the gate, and then I stopped, turned back one more time. Oh, and Lydia, you might want to check with your lawyer before you try to come after me for any money. Mine says you don't have a case, but feel free to try. I've got time and documentation, do you? The silence I left behind was louder than any argument could have been. I got in my truck, drove away, and smiled the entire way home. The fallout from the party was swift and honestly kind of beautiful in its chaos. By Sunday morning, my phone was blowing up. Eli had texted me. That was the most savage thing I've ever seen in real life. Mom's been pacing around the house all night. Tommy called to ask if I'd completely lost my mind or finally found it, which I thought was a pretty fair question. And then there were the messages from random numbers, people from the party apparently who'd gotten my contact info somehow and wanted to tell me they'd always thought Lydia was fake. And good for you for standing up for yourself. But the best part, the absolute cherry on top of this ridiculous Sunday, I decided to do what I do best. Turned my life into content. That Sunday night, I sat down at my desk, set up my phone camera, and recorded what would become my most viewed video ever. Hey everyone, Jack here from Handy Truths. Today, we're not talking about tools or home repairs. Today, we're talking about something that broke me more than any busted pipe or stripped screw ever could. Today, we're talking about the day my family gave me a mug for Father's Day that said, "World's biggest disappointment." I told the whole story, not vindicatively. I didn't name names, didn't show faces, just told it honestly. The mug, the laughter, the leaving, the months of rebuilding, the journey from broken to better. And at the end, I held up the mug itself. This mug sits on my desk now. It holds my pens, not my pain. Because here's what I learned. When people label you as a disappointment, they're really telling you about their expectations, not your worth. They expected me to stay, to keep taking it, to keep being their punching bag disguised as just kidding around. And I disappointed them by choosing myself instead. I posted it with the title "World's Biggest Disappointment." The day my family gifted me freedom in a mug. It went viral. Not TikTok dance viral, but real people sharing real stories viral. Within 48 hours, it had 500,000 views. The comment section became this unexpected support group for people, mostly men, who'd been through similar situations. Same brother left after 20 years of being the joke. My wife gave me a "world's okayest husband" shirt and meant it as an insult. I feel this sometimes. Leaving is the bravest thing you can do. News outlets picked it up. Local ones first, then regional. I did a few interviews, always keeping it classy, never mentioning Lydia or the kids by name, just telling my story. The story of a guy who got knocked down and chose to get back up. And then 2 weeks after the video went viral, I got an email that made me stare at my screen for a solid 5 minutes from email protected. Subject: I'm sorry. I read your post. I watched your video. I didn't understand before. I'm sorry for the mug. I'm sorry for laughing. I'm sorry for not seeing what it was doing to you. I don't expect you to forgive me or want anything to do with me, but you deserve to know that I finally get it. You weren't the disappointment. We were disappointed in ourselves and took it out on you. That wasn't fair. I'm working on being better. I hope you're doing well. You seem happy in your videos. I'm glad, Madison. It wasn't a full apology. It didn't fix everything, but it was honest, and that was more than I'd ever gotten when I was living in that house. I wrote back, thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. I hope you're doing well, too. The offer for coffee is always open if you want to talk. She never took me up on it, but knowing she'd reached out, that she'd grown enough to recognize what had happened, that was enough. 6 months after leaving, I was in a better place than I'd been in years. The YouTube channel was thriving, 50,000 subscribers and growing. I'd started doing actual handyman work on the side, building a client base through word of mouth in my videos. I'd moved into a bigger apartment, one without the constant smell of pizza, though I kind of missed it. Eli and I still met every other Saturday. He decided on a college across the state, far enough from home to breathe, close enough to visit. I'd offered to help him move in when the time came, and he'd said yes without hesitation. The divorce papers had been filed. Lydia hadn't contested them surprisingly. According to Jill, my lawyer, she'd realized that fighting would just make her look worse, especially after my video. Sometimes the court of public opinion is more powerful than actual court. And the mug, it still sat on my desk holding pins and the occasional paperclip. People asked me in videos why I kept it if it didn't just remind me of bad times. But here's the thing, it did remind me. It reminded me that I'd survived, that I'd taken the worst thing someone could give me and turned it into motivation, that their attempt to break me had actually freed me. Every morning, I'd grab a pen from that mug to write down my to-do list. And every morning, I'd smile because I was living proof that you can be someone's disappointment and still be your own success story. They'd thought that mug would define me. They were right, just not in the way they'd intended. It defined the moment I chose myself. The moment I decided that being called a disappointment by people who didn't value me was better than being valued by people who only saw me as a joke. I was the world's biggest disappointment to them. But to myself, I was finally enough. And that, as it turned out, was the only opinion that really mattered.
That brings this story to an end, and that one was definitely a wild ride. Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, let's move into the next story, titled,
During Thanksgiving, my Dill threw a plate at me after I refused to let her parents move into my house. You old selfish man. She said, and my son added, don't call me your son anymore. I just smiled, got up, and called my brother. Phase 1 complete. The police arrived. The silence at the table felt deliberate, rehearsed. I'd brought wine, a decent Cabernet, and a pecan pie from the bakery Herbert used to love as a kid. Both sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Beulah carved the turkey with mechanical precision, her jaw set tight. Herbert wouldn't meet my eyes. Something was wrong. I'd felt it the moment I stepped through the door 20 minutes earlier. The house, a modest rental in Tempe they'd moved to 6 months ago, smelled right, looked normal. Roasted turkey, sweet potatoes, the usual. Thanksgiving spread, but the temperature was all wrong. Cold despite the Arizona heat outside. Pass the rolls, please, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Herbert fumbled with the basket, nearly dropped it. His hands trembled slightly as he set it beside my plate. Beulah watched him with the focused intensity of a handler, watching a trained dog perform. Your father asked for rolls, Herbert. Her tone was silk over steel. Right, sorry. Here you go, Dad. I took one, buttered it slowly. 35 years as a prosecutor taught me patience. Taught me to wait for suspects to reveal themselves. Whatever this was, it would come out soon enough. They always told you eventually. They couldn't help themselves. Beulah set down her knife. My parents are packing their things to move into your house. The butter knife paused halfway across the roll. I looked up. Excuse me? They're losing their apartment. She said it like she was discussing the weather. Casual and final. Your house has plenty of room. They'll move in by mid-December. Not a question, not a request, a statement of fact, delivered with the confidence of someone who believed the decision had already been made. My house is not a hotel for strangers, I said. Beulah's fork froze midair. Strangers? They're my parents. Your family. My family doesn't make decisions about my property without asking me first. The air shifted. Herbert cleared his throat, a nervous sound that echoed in the sudden quiet. He glanced at Beulah, then at his plate, then at some point over my left shoulder. Anywhere but at me. Dad, come on. His voice came out thin, stretched. It's just temporary. They really need help. And you've got 4 bedrooms sitting empty. I've got 4 bedrooms that I paid for. I set down my fork carefully, aligned it with the edge of my plate. That doesn't obligate me to house anyone. That's not fair. Herbert's face flushed. Family helps family. I turned to look at my son fully for the first time that evening. Really looked at him. Saw the boy who used to build model airplanes at the kitchen table, who called me after every law school exam to dissect his answers. That boy was gone. The man sitting across from me had made different choices. Had chosen a different alliance. What exactly has Herbert done for you? I kept my voice level, professional courtroom voice. Beulah's mouth opened, closed. She had no answer because there wasn't one. My son lived in my Scottsdale house, the one I'd bought after 3 decades of prosecuting thieves and liars and people who took what wasn't theirs. He'd lived there rentrée for 4 years. 4 years of mortgage payments I still made. 4 years of property taxes and insurance and repairs. 4 years of him promising it was temporary just until he got established. Just until they saved enough for their own place. 4 years of lies. You're alone in that big house. Beulah leaned forward, trying a different approach. Her voice softened artificially, coated in fake concern. What do you need 4 bedrooms for? You'll die alone there. How I live and where I die is my decision. You're being cruel. The softness evaporated. We're family. Family helps each other. Family asks. Family doesn't demand. I watched her face transform. The mask slipped. And underneath it, I saw something ugly. Entitlement. Pure naked entitlement. She'd expected me to fold. Expected gratitude for being allowed to exploit me further. Expected an old man who wouldn't fight back. Herbert shifted in his seat, positioning himself closer to his wife. The physical distance between us felt suddenly vast, unbridgeable. He nodded along with her words, silent agreement in every gesture. You have to admit, he said quietly, the house is big for one person. I worked 35 years for that house. I met his eyes. I don't have to admit anything. The question crystallized in my mind as I looked at them across the table. The careful way Beulah had phrased her announcement. The lack of surprise on Herbert's face when I refused. The rehearsed quality of their arguments. They never planned to leave my house, did they? This wasn't about helping Beulah's parents. This was about control, about taking what they believed they were owed, about an old man who should know his place and accept whatever scraps of dignity they allowed him. I set my napkin beside my plate. Movements precise and controlled. The turkey had gone cold on my fork. The wine I'd brought sat unopened in the kitchen. None of it mattered now. Beulah's face darkened as she watched me. You're a selfish old man, she said, each word dropping like a stone. You have everything and give nothing. I looked at my son, waited for him to speak, waited for him to remember who raised him, who paid for his education, who gave him a place to live when he needed it. Waited for some sign of the boy who used to be there. Herbert looked away. The silence stretched between us, thick and poisonous. Outside, somewhere in the Tempe neighborhood, children laughed. A dog barked. Normal Thanksgiving sounds from normal families. Inside this room, something had broken that couldn't be repaired. They expected me to break, to apologize, to cave under the weight of their judgment and their certainty that they knew better than me how I should live my life. They didn't know me at all. Beulah leaned across the table, her voice rising. You're alone in that house. What do you need 4 bedrooms for? You'll die alone there. How I live and where I die is my decision, I repeated, keeping my tone flat. You're being cruel, she gestured with her fork, emphatic and angry. We're family. Family helps each other. Family asks. Family doesn't demand. Herbert cleared his throat again. That same nervous sound. Dad, you have to admit the house is big for one person. I turned to look at him. I worked 35 years for that house. I don't have to admit anything. I'm just saying sharing wouldn't hurt you. I'm not sharing. That's my final answer. Beulah's face flushed deep red. She stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. You're a selfish old man. You have everything and give nothing. I remained seated, calm. I gave your husband 4 years of free housing. I'd say that's something. The truth landed like a slap. Beulah's expression twisted, fury and shame wearing across her features. Herbert looked at his plate, at the wall, anywhere but at either of us. Old egoist. Beulah screamed, her hand shot out, grabbed her dinner plate. Time seemed to slow as she lifted it above her shoulder, food still on it, gravy dripping. I leaned sideways. The plate sailed past my head so close I felt the air displacement. It exploded against the wall behind me. Ceramic shards scattered across the floor. A piece of turkey slid down the wallpaper. Gravy splattered in a wide arc. Nobody moved. Nobody apologized. Herbert stared at the broken pieces on the floor, expression unreadable. Beulah stood panting, chest heaving, hands clenched at her sides. No remorse on her face, only righteous fury. The silence rang louder than the crash. I straightened in my chair, adjusted my collar. My heart beat steady, calm. I'd prosecuted violent offenders for decades. Seen worse than a throne plate. Much worse. This was theater. Amateur theater at that. Herbert finally looked up. Not at me. At his wife. Some silent communication passed between them. He stood slowly, moved to her side, positioned himself shoulder to shoulder with her, a united front. When he spoke, his voice was cold, practiced. The words came out smooth, like he'd rehearsed them. Don't call me your son anymore. I met his eyes, waited. You're not my father. There it was, the final card played. The ultimate manipulation. He expected tears, expected pleading, expected an old man desperate for his son's love to cave under the weight of rejection. If that's how you want it, I said quietly. Herbert blinked, thrown. That wasn't the script. Beulah's mouth pressed into a thin line. I stood, movements deliberate and controlled. Pushed my chair back under the table. Habits from a lifetime of discipline. Walked calmly toward the kitchen. No rush, no stumbling. My legs were steady. My hands didn't shake. Behind me, I heard Beulah whisper something sharp to Herbert. Heard him whisper back. They thought they'd won. Thought the old man was retreating, defeated. They were wrong. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Scrolled to Alfred's contact. My younger brother, the notary and property lawyer, the one who'd warned me 6 months ago when Herbert and Beulah moved out of my Scottsdale house without giving up their keys. The one who'd said, Amos, they're playing you. Let me prepare something just in case. I'd resisted then. Hoped I was wrong about my own son. Hoped family meant something. I wasn't wrong. Family meant nothing to Herbert. Not anymore. The phone rang twice. Alfred picked up immediately. How'd it go? His voice was careful, controlled. Exactly as you predicted. I kept my voice steady. Matter of fact, activate the plan. Phase 1 is complete. I'll start the paperwork tomorrow. Through the doorway, I could see Herbert and Beulah watching me. Their faces had changed. Uncertainty crept in around the edges of their anger. They had expected crying or yelling or desperate attempts at reconciliation. Instead, they got this. A calm phone call, cold efficiency, no emotion at all. Good. Let them wonder. Perfect, I said to Alfred and ended the call. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, looked through the doorway at my son and his wife. They stood close together, united in their certainty that I was the villain in their story, that I owed them something beyond what I'd already given. That my refusal to be exploited further made me cruel. Let them think what they wanted. The game had changed. They just didn't know it yet. I walked toward the front door, passing through the dining room without hurrying. Herbert took a half step forward, some automatic instinct, then stopped. Beulah grabbed his arm, held him back. My hand found the doorknob. I turned it slowly, pulled the door open. Cool evening air rushed in, carrying the scent of mesquite and desert sage. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Normal Phoenix sounds. Normal world continuing outside this bubble of dysfunction. Dad. Herbert's voice cracked slightly. I paused, looked back, gave him one more chance to be the man I'd raised, the man who understood right from wrong, the man who wouldn't throw away his father because his wife demanded it. He said nothing else. Just stood there, Beulah's hand tight on his arm, mouth opening and closing like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. Too late anyway. I stepped through the door into the November evening. Behind me, I heard Beulah say something low and harsh. Heard the door slam shut. Heard the deadbolt slide into place with a final metallic click. I walked to my car, a 10-year-old Camry, reliable and paid off, and unlocked it with steady hands. Sat in the driver's seat. Didn't start the engine right away. Just sat there breathing evenly, processing. The hurt would come later, maybe. Or maybe it wouldn't. Right now, all I felt was clarity. Cold, crystalline clarity. I'd spent decades prosecuting people who believed the rules didn't apply to them, who believed they could take and face no consequences. My own son thought he could do the same. He was about to learn otherwise. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb. In my rear view mirror, the rental house disappeared behind a row of palms. I didn't look back again. The victim had died in that house. The person who had left was someone else entirely. Someone who understood that revenge wasn't about anger. It was about consequences. Justice. Making sure people face the results of their choices. Phase 1 complete. Tomorrow, Alfred would begin Phase 2. And Herbert wouldn't see it coming until it was far too late. I didn't sleep much that night. By the time dawn broke over the desert, I was already dressed and driving east toward Scottsdale. The city was quiet at 7 o'clock in the morning. Traffic light on Thanksgiving weekend. Alfred's office sat in a small professional complex off Scottsdale Road. I'd been there before. Notarizations, estate planning discussions. This visit felt different. Alfred had coffee ready when I walked in. 2 cups, black. 3 thick folders sat on his desk, labeled and organized. He looked up, gestured to the chair across from him. "I've been preparing for this conversation for 6 months," he said. I sat, took the offered coffee. 6 months? You mentioned they'd been in your house a while. I started documenting. He opened the first folder. Utility bills every month for 4 years. Water, electric, gas, all in your name, all paid by you. The pages spread across his desk like evidence at trial. My evidence, my money, numbers. I've been avoiding looking at too closely because I didn't want to see what they revealed. Second folder, Alfred tapped it. Property tax statements. You've paid $9,200 annually for that house. They've contributed 0. And the third, rental market analysis. He pulled out printed comparisons. Similar homes in Scottsdale. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, your square footage. Average rent, $2,800 per month. I did the math automatically. 48 months times $2,800 plus utilities, roughly $340 monthly plus proportional property taxes. The number made my jaw tighten. $48,000, Alfred said quietly. That's what you've subsidized over 4 years. The coffee tasted bitter suddenly. I set it down. No rental agreement was ever signed. Alfred already knew the answer. No. I told Herbert he could stay temporarily while they saved money. I heard how naive that sounded now. It was supposed to be 6 months. Alfred closed the folders, stacked them precisely. Legally, they're guests who overstayed, not tenants with rights. That's our advantage. What do you recommend? Eviction notice. Arizona Revised Statute Section 331,368. 30 days for guests without lease agreements. Clean, straightforward. He pulled a 4th document from his drawer. I've already drafted it. I read through the legal language. Formal, final, no room for misinterpretation. You'll also need a real estate attorney, Alfred continued. Someone who handles evictions regularly. I've got a name, Lewis Hill. Solid reputation. Won't overcharge you. Set it up. Alfred made the call that afternoon. By the next morning, I was sitting in Lewis Hill's office. Modern, efficient, walls lined with property law books. Lewis was younger than I expected, early 40s, but his handshake was firm and his eyes were sharp. Your brother sent me the documentation, Lewis said, getting straight to business. Without a lease, this is straightforward. 30-day notice. If they don't vacate, we file for court-ordered eviction. Timeline notice gets served by sheriff's deputy. Official record. After 30 days, if they're still there, we file. Court date, typically within 5 to 7 days. Arizona favors property owners in these situations. I want this done correctly. No procedural mistakes they can exploit. Lewis smiled slightly. That's why you hire an attorney. I'll handle everything. The retainer was $3,500. I wrote the check without hesitation. December 2nd arrived cold and clear. Lewis coordinated with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. At 2:17 in the afternoon, a deputy knocked on my Scottsdale house door. Herbert answered confused. The deputy handed him the sealed envelope, explained what it was, logged the delivery time. Official, legal, irreversible. Lewis called me 20 minutes later. It's done. He's been served. I marked the date in my calendar. January 2nd, 30 days. My phone rang less than an hour after service. Unknown number. I answered, Dad. Herbert's voice cracked. Please, we can work this out. Don't do this. I kept my tone flat. Professional. You had 4 years. We'll pay rent. We'll sign a lease. Just give us more time. 30 days from December 2nd. After that, court. Dad. I ended the call. The phone buzzed immediately. Text messages. Beulah. I read the first 3. You'll regret this. I'll tell everyone what kind of person you are. You're destroying your family. I blocked both numbers. The phone fell silent. Minutes later, Alfred called. Did they try to contact you? Herbert called. Beulah texted threats. Did you engage briefly? Then I blocked them both. Good. Alfred's voice carried satisfaction. Don't respond to anything else. Let the legal process work. That's exactly what I intend to do. I hung up and walked to my kitchen window. The house was quiet. Properly quiet. Not the oppressive silence of avoiding difficult truths. I'd prosecuted criminals for 35 years. Learned that justice worked when you followed procedure, documented everything. Let the system do what it was designed to do. Herbert and Beulah had 4 years to act like family. 4 years to show gratitude, respect, basic human decency. Instead, they'd shown me exactly who they were. I believed them. The law was on my side now. And the law doesn't care about tantrums or manipulation or social media campaigns. The law cares about contracts, property rights, documented evidence. I had all three. They had 30 days. The week after I served the eviction notice, my phone started ringing. Not Herbert or Beulah. I blocked them. Other people, old colleagues, distant acquaintances, people I hadn't spoken to in months, asking if I was okay. The first was Raymond, retired from the prosecutor's office 3 years before me. Amos, I saw something on Facebook. Your daughter-in-law posted about you evicting them. Are you all right? I'm fine, Raymond. She's saying you're throwing them out before Christmas, making it sound pretty harsh. I kept my voice neutral. It's a legal matter. I'm handling it appropriately. But is it true? Are you really? You don't have the full story. Trust that I do. Silence on his end. Then all right, just wanted to check. 3 more calls came that day to the next. All variations of the same conversation. All asking questions based on Beulah's version of events. I gave the same response each time. Brief, factual, non-defensive. On the third day, I looked at Beulah's public Facebook profile through a mutual connections account. There it was, 3 paragraphs of carefully crafted narrative. Herbert looking mournful in a photograph, eyes downcast. The post painted me as a wealthy, heartless father evicting his struggling son right before the holidays. Hashtags at the bottom. One Schaff family betrayal. Yahweh elder abuse. The irony of that last hashtag wasn't lost on me. Comments below range from supportive to skeptical. Some people bought it completely. Others asked questions Beulah didn't answer. I closed the browser without responding. Wouldn't give her that satisfaction. When the next acquaintance called, someone from my old neighborhood, I adjusted my response slightly. Why before Christmas, though? Couldn't you wait until January? The notice was served December 2nd. The deadline is January 2nd. That's 30 days as Arizona law requires. Still seems harsh. You're entitled to your opinion. That shut down most arguments. Facts, not emotion. Legal requirements, not personal justifications. December the 16th, Alfred called. Herbert contacted me. Wants to meet with you. What about? He said to talk, work something out, his words. I considered refusing, then reconsidered. One more chance. One final opportunity for Herbert to speak his piece like a man. Fine. Coffee shop in Old Town. Thursday afternoon, 3 o'clock. He comes alone. Are you sure that's wise? Probably not, but I'll hear what he has to say. December 18th arrived overcast and cool. I reached the coffee shop 5 minutes early, ordered black coffee, took a corner table with clear view of the entrance. Herbert arrived exactly on time. Beulah walked in behind him. My jaw tightened, but I didn't stand. Didn't leave. Just watched them approach. Herbert looking nervous. Beulah defiant. They sat. Herbert spoke first. Words rushing out. Dad, please listen. 6 more months. We'll pay $500 a month. We'll sign an official lease. Legal and everything. Beulah added, that's fair. That's reasonable. Any landlord would accept it. I sipped my coffee. Let them finish. Then any landlord wouldn't have given you 4 years rentrée. Herbert's face flushed. We know. We took advantage. We're sorry, but we're asking 30 days court if necessary. Beulah leaned forward. 6 months isn't unreasonable. We're offering to pay $500 a month. I kept my voice level. Market rate for that house is $2,800. Your offer is insulting. It's what we can afford. Then you can't afford to live there. Herbert tried again. We made mistakes at Thanksgiving. We were emotional. Said things we didn't mean. You told me I wasn't your father. You meant it. Silence. Herbert looked at his hands. Beulah's face darkened. This is revenge, she said, voice rising. You're punishing us because we hurt your feelings. No, this is consequence. Learn the difference. She stood abruptly, chair scraping. Other customers turned. You're a bitter old man. You can't accept that Herbert chose me over you. I stood too, calm and controlled. Placed a $10 bill on the table beside my untouched coffee. January 2nd, I said, looking only at Herbert. I walked toward the door. Behind me, Beulah's voice rose higher, accusations blending together. Herbert didn't follow, didn't defend me, didn't do anything except sit there, shoulders slumped, defeated. I pushed through the door into cold December air, walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine. Through the coffee shop window, I could see Herbert still at the table, head in his hands. Beulah stood over him, arms crossed, face red, mouth moving rapidly, probably blaming me for her outburst, for their situation, for everything except their own choices. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just absolute certainty. They would not leave voluntarily. January 2nd would arrive and they'd still be in my house, still believing somehow this would work out in their favor, still thinking I'd cave under social pressure or family sentiment or Christmas spirit. They didn't understand. This wasn't about holidays or emotions or public opinion. This was about property rights, legal boundaries, and consequences for exploitation. The court would make them leave. Simple as that. I started the engine and drove home through Scottsdale's quiet streets. Christmas lights decorated houses I passed. Wreaths, inflatable decorations, trees visible through windows. Normal families preparing for normal holidays. I'd have a quiet Christmas alone. I'd had quiet Christmases before. Preferred them, honestly. No drama, no false cheer, no pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. My house, my real house, the one I actually lived in, would be peaceful, clean, mine. And come January, the Scottsdale house would be mine again, too. All of it. Legally, finally, permanently. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone, which suited me fine. The day after, Alfred called. You need to see what I found. Can you come to the office? His tone told me everything. This wasn't good news. December 27th, I sat across from Alfred as he spread new documents across his desk. 3 folders this time, each thicker than the last. Coffee steamed between us, untouched. I've been digging into Herbert's finances, Alfred said, preparing for potential court challenges. You need to see this. He opened the first folder, credit reports. 7 different credit cards, all near or at their limits. The numbers climbed steadily. 8,000, 11,000, 13,000. My eyes found the total at the bottom. 47,000 in credit card debt. I kept my voice level. That's just the credit cards. Alfred opened the second folder. Auto loan on that Dodge Charger. He drives. 31,000 remaining. 3 missed payments. Repossession notice dated December 15th. I did the math automatically. 78,000 so far. There's more. Alfred slid bank statements across regular transfers to offshore gambling sites. 12,000 over 2 years that I can track online poker. My hands tightened on the folder edges. Herbert had a gambling problem. How would I miss that? Because you weren't looking, Alfred said, reading my expression. He hit it well. Probably hit it from Beulah, too. Initially 90,000 in debt. The number felt obscene. We're not done. Alfred produced a loan application from the third folder. Beulah took out 18,000 in Herbert's name last year. Personal loan purpose listed as business investment. I examined the signature. Did he know? Alfred shrugged. That signature looks questionable. Might want a handwriting analyst, but I doubt it matters now. He showed me receipts stapled to the back. Instagram influencer courses, marketing seminars, motivational coaching programs, $18,000 in 4 months, all worthless. $108,000. I set the document down carefully. Combined debt. That's catastrophic for 2 people earning what they earn. Alfred paused, his expression darkening further. But there's one more thing, the worst thing. He pulled a separate folder from his drawer marked critical in red ink. Inside was a mortgage refinancing application dated June 2023. My address listed at the top. I scanned down to the applicant information. Herbert Wright listed as co-owner. My vision narrowed. What is this? He tried to refinance your house. $400,000 cash out refinance. Claimed he was co-owner. The bank required ownership documents. He couldn't provide them. Application rejected in 2 weeks. I read through the form again, slower this time. Every line felt like betrayal written in ink. My son had tried to steal my house. Not ask, not discuss, steal. He actually filed this. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Yes. And when it failed? Alfred leaned forward. Think about the timeline. June 2023. Refinancing rejected. By late 2023, they're talking about Beulah's parents moving in, creating more occupants, more claim to the property. The pieces aligned with terrible clarity. It was planned. All of it, I think. So, 4 years establishing residency, then the refinancing attempt. When that failed, they needed another angle. More people in the house makes eviction harder. Strengthens any future claim. I stood, walked to Alfred's window. Below Scottsdale Road carried normal traffic, normal people living normal lives, not discovering their children had been planning theft for years. They never intended to leave, I said quietly. No. And if you died first? Alfred didn't finish. Didn't need to. If I died, they'd have claimed the house was theirs. 4 years of residency, no written agreement, possession is 9/10N of the law. They'd have fought any legal challenge from the estate, tied it up in court for years. I turned back to Alfred. What else do I need to know? That's everything. The debt is documented. The refinancing attempt is documented. The gambling pattern is documented. If they try to claim hardship in court, we have evidence of why they're in hardship. Will we need this for the eviction hearing? Probably not. Eviction is straightforward. No lease, no rent paid, proper notice given. But if they make allegations about you or try to claim some verbal agreement, Alfred tapped the folders. We have ammunition. I gathered the folders, each one a weapon for the coming battle. My coffee had gone cold. I hadn't touched it. They don't know you have all this, Alfred said, walking me to the door. Good. They think they're just fighting an eviction. I looked at him. They're not fighting an eviction. They're fighting a prosecutor with 35 years of experience building cases against people who take what isn't theirs. Alfred smiled grimly. Lewis filed the court papers yesterday. Hearing is January 16th. I'll be ready. I drove home through quiet postal streets. Christmas decorations still hung on houses, looking tired and slightly sad. The season of goodwill and family togetherness had ended. Reality reasserted itself. In my living room, I spread Alfred's folders across my coffee table, reviewed each document again, the credit card statements showing systematic maxing out. The gambling transfers steady as clockwork. The influencer course receipts, each one more absurd than the last. The refinancing application with its audacious lie. My son owed $108,000. My son had gambling addiction. My son had tried to steal my house. These were facts. Documented, verified, undeniable facts. The Herbert I'd raised, the boy who built model airplanes, who called after exams, who once had integrity, that Herbert was gone, if he'd ever really existed. This Herbert, the one revealed in these documents, was someone I didn't know, someone I didn't want to know. The court date was January 16th, 19 days away. I'd be ready, more than ready. The 2 weeks between New Year and the hearing moved slowly. I reviewed documents each evening. Lewis prepared our case. When January 16th arrived, I dressed in my courtroom suit, the same one I'd worn for 35 years, and drove downtown. I reached the Justice Court at 8:20. Lewis waited near the courtroom door, briefcase beside him. Ready? He asked. I nodded. Through the hallway window, I saw Herbert and Beulah arrive in the parking lot. Even from this distance, the tension was visible. Beulah gestured sharply. Herbert's shoulders slumped. They entered the building at 8:45. Beulah's eyes found mine immediately. Pure hatred radiated from her. Herbert wouldn't look at me, just stared at the floor, hands shoved in his pockets. The bailiff called our case at 9:03. Inside, the courtroom was exactly what I expected. Standard civil court. Judge's bench, 2 tables, minimal seating. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Everything was beige and official and impersonal. Perfect. Judge Martinez reviewed the file, then looked up. This is a forcible entry and detainer action. Mr. Wright, you're represented by counsel. Mr. and Mrs. Wright, you're self-represented. Herbert nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Do the defendants wish to respond to the eviction action? Beulah stood immediately. She dressed carefully. Conservative blouse, minimal makeup, highlighting her eyes for maximum sympathy effect. Your Honor, my father-in-law promised he'd always take care of us. We trusted him completely. Her voice cracked on cue. Our children depend on their grandfather. This eviction will traumatize them emotionally. Judge Martinez looked at the file. How many minor children reside at the property? Beulah hesitated. 2? I mean, emotionally, they're like his children. I asked about minor children living at the property. The file lists no dependents under 18. I meant, please sit down, Mrs. Wright. Beulah sat, face flushing. First lie exposed within 3 minutes. I kept my expression neutral, but satisfaction settled in my chest. Lewis stood. Your Honor, I'll be brief. The evidence is straightforward. He submitted exhibits methodically. Property deed showing 100% ownership by Amos Wright. 4 years of utility bills, all paid by plaintiff. Bank statements showing 0 rent payments received from defendants. The 30-day notice properly served December 2nd by Maricopa County Sheriff. Signed receipt of service. The defendants are guests who overstayed. Lewis concluded. Arizona Revised Statutes. Section 33168 applies clearly. The law is unambiguous. Judge Martinez reviewed the documents. The courtroom fell silent except for pages turning. 20 minutes passed. I watched Herbert stare at his hands. Watched Beulah's jaw clench tighter and tighter. Finally, the judge looked up. I find for the plaintiff. Defendants are ordered to vacate the premises within 5 days, no later than January 21st. Sheriff will supervise removal if necessary. Herbert stood abruptly. Your Honor, please. Can we have 30 more days? We have nowhere to go. You had 30 days. You ignored the legal notice. We thought we could work something out with my father. That's not how eviction law works. The notice was proper. The deadline passed. Motion for extension denied. Herbert's voice broke. But we have nowhere. The gavel struck. You should have considered that before ignoring a legal eviction notice. 5 days. Next case. Beulah erupted. This isn't over. You're a monster. She whirled toward me. You'll regret this. I stood, met her eyes directly. My voice came out level and clear. No, I won't. You're destroying your family. I turned to Lewis, ignoring her completely. When do they need to be out? January 21st. Sheriff will supervise if needed. Behind us, Beulah continued shouting. The bailiff moved toward her. Herbert grabbed her arm, pulled her toward the exit. Her voice echoed down the hallway even after the courtroom door closed. Lewis gathered the exhibits. That went exactly as expected. Yes, it did. 5 days later, January 21st arrived cold and bright. I drove to my Scottsdale house at 9:30. The sheriff's vehicle was already there. 2 deputies standing on the lawn. Mr. Wright, the senior deputy, checked his clipboard. We're here to supervise the eviction. You just need to observe. Confirm when they're gone. I nodded, staying near my car, keeping distance. At 10 o'clock, Herbert and Beulah emerged with the first load of boxes. A rental truck sat in the driveway. Beulah's sedan beside it. They worked in tense silence, carrying boxes, loading furniture. 2 hours for the first trip. They returned at 1 o'clock for the second load. Less furniture this time, mostly boxes. By 3 o'clock, the truck was packed. Herbert approached me. I straightened, ready for anything. Dad. His voice was barely audible. I'm sorry for everything. Goodbye, Herbert. Can't we? Goodbye. His face crumbled. I'm still your son. I looked at him. Really looked at him for what I knew was the last time. No, you're not. From the truck, Beulah yelled, Herbert, let's go. He turned away. Climbed into the passenger seat. The truck pulled out of the driveway, Beulah's sedan following. They drove away toward Tempe, toward her parents' cramped apartment, toward whatever life they'd built on lies and debt. The senior deputy approached. Property is yours again, sir. We'll note the time as 3:17 p.m. He handed me an envelope. New keys, locks were changed per your attorney's request. Thank you. The deputies left. Their vehicle disappeared down the street. I stood alone in the driveway, looked at my house, finally mine again. I unlocked the front door with a new key, stepped inside, empty. They'd left nothing behind except dust and silence. The walls held echoes of their 4 years. Arguments I hadn't witnessed, lies I hadn't heard, plans I'd almost fallen victim to. I walked through each room. Living room, kitchen, bedrooms, bathroom, all empty, all mine. The legal battle was won. The house reclaimed, justice served. But standing in that empty living room, I understood something clearly. I'd traded a son for justice. Some might say that was too high a price. I wasn't one of them. The house felt different now. Empty, yes, but also clean. Mine again. I'd spent the first week after the eviction scrubbing away their presence, repainting the master bedroom, replacing the living room carpet. By early February, I was ready for the next phase. Alfred called on February 3rd. Time to talk about compensation. I drove to his office that afternoon. He had spreadsheets ready, organized in neat columns. 4 years, 48 months, every dollar documented. Market rate for a house like yours, Alfred said, tapping the first column. $2,800 per month times 48 months. I calculated automatically. $134,000 plus utilities $340 monthly. That's another $16,000. Property taxes proportional share for 4 years $36,800. The total sat at the bottom of the page $187,520s. That's half what my house is worth, I said. Nearly half, Alfred confirmed. Now, the question isn't what they took, it's what we can realistically collect. They're broke. Exactly. Lewis suggests we sue for $50,000. Substantial enough to matter. Small enough that they might actually be able to pay over time. Creates a judgment that follows them for decades. I studied the numbers. They'd stolen $187,000. We'd sue for $50,000. The difference felt like mercy they didn't deserve. But Alfred was right. You can't squeeze blood from stone. File it, I said. Lewis filed the civil complaint on February 10th. Unjust enrichment. Arizona law recognized it clearly. They'd received benefit at my expense without legal justification. The filing fee was $349. Service of process was arranged through a professional server. February 15th, both defendants were officially served. The clock started ticking. The phone calls began 2 days later. Raymond first. Amos Herbert called me. He's desperate to talk to you. Can't you work something out? I have nothing to say to him. He's your son. He was my son. Now he's a defendant in a civil lawsuit. My attorney handles communication with defendants. That's cold. That's appropriate. Raymond hung up. 2 more calls came that week. An old neighbor, a former colleague, all with the same message. Herbert wanted to talk, wanted to negotiate, wanted mercy. My response never varied. This is a legal matter. My attorney is handling it. The call stopped after the 3rd attempt. Word spread quickly enough. Amos Wright would not be moved. February 18th, Alfred received a certified letter. He called me immediately. Beulah sent me a letter. 3 pages. Threats mostly. What kind of threats? She'll appeal everything. Claims you're harassing them. Says she's getting a real lawyer. He paused. Should I respond? Professionally, let her know appeals cost money. Alfred's written response was 1 paragraph. I asked him to read it to me. Mrs. Wright, you are welcome to appeal or engage additional counsel. Please note that unsuccessful appeals will result in additional court costs which may be assessed against you. She didn't write again. February 25th arrived cold and clear. I was reading in my living room at 11:40 when I heard shouting from outside. I went to the window. Herbert stood on the sidewalk, illuminated by street light. Dad, I know you're in there. Please just talk to me. Neighbor's lights turned on. Mrs. Chen across the street peered through her curtains. Herbert's voice carried through the quiet neighborhood, desperate and slurred. I didn't open the door, didn't shout back. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. There's a man outside my house yelling and refusing to leave. Police arrived in 6 minutes. 2 officers. By then, Herbert was crying, begging them. That's my father. I just want to talk to him. One officer came to my door. Do you know this man, sir? Herbert Wright, my former son. We're involved in civil litigation. I don't want him. We'll issue a warning. If he returns, call immediately. You may want to consider a restraining order. I'll discuss that with my attorney. Thank you, officer. They escorted Herbert to his car, watched him drive away. The police report would arrive by mail in 3 days. Report number 2,543,892. Another document for the file. I closed the door, locked it, set the alarm. Through the window, I watched the police cruiser's tail lights disappear down my street. Herbert had become someone I didn't recognize. Or perhaps someone he'd always been, finally revealed. The civil hearing was scheduled for March 5th, 3 more weeks. I went back to my book. The legal system had him now. I could let it work. The week after the midnight incident passed quietly. March 5th arrived, the civil hearing. I met Lewis in the Superior Court lobby at 8:30. He carried a briefcase I hadn't seen before, thicker. New evidence, he said. From Discovery. You need to see this. We found a bench in the hallway. Lewis pulled out printouts. Email correspondence. The header read, Future Property Sale, Scottsdale. Beulah's emails with a real estate agent, Lewis explained. October 2023. I read the first message. Beulah's words. When my father-in-law passes, the house will need to be sold. Estimated value $850K. I expect to receive at minimum half, possibly more. The agent's response discussed commission rates, market timing, staging recommendations. She was planning my funeral, I said quietly. She was planning to profit from it. The courtroom was formal, wood paneling, elevated bench, court reporter. Judge Martinez presided, the same judge from the eviction hearing. He recognized me with a brief nod. Lewis presented exhibits methodically. The financial calculation, the eviction judgment establishing merit, then the devastating new evidence. Exhibit M, Herbert's refinancing application from June 2023, claiming co-ownership. Exhibit N, Beulah's email correspondence with the realtor. Judge Martinez read the emails aloud, his voice hardening with each line. Mrs. Wright, did you write these emails discussing the sale of property at 2847 Desert Vista Drive? Beulah pale. That was just exploring options. Options for selling property you don't own. It would have been family property. It is not family property. It is Mr. Amos Wright's sole property. Did you have permission to discuss its sale? Silence, then quietly. No. Their chief lawyer had nothing to offer. No defense against documents against their own words. Judge Martinez reviewed the evidence for 20 minutes. The courtroom fell silent except for papers rustling. Finally, he spoke. This court finds a clear pattern of financial exploitation. The defendants engaged in systematic abuse of plaintiff's generosity, attempted fraudulent refinancing, and planned property theft following plaintiff's anticipated death. Herbert stared at the floor. Beulah sat frozen. While plaintiff seeks $50,000, this court awards $42,000 in compensatory damages payable at $1,750 monthly for 24 months. Herbert's lawyer stood. Your Honor, that amount is approximately 45% of defendant Herbert Wright's net monthly income. I'm aware. Judge Martinez's expression remained hard. Perhaps he should have considered that before attempting to defraud his father. Wage garnishment authorized if payment lapses. Next case, the gavel struck. Outside the courthouse, Herbert approached me one last time. Dad, I'm sorry for everything. I stopped, turned. Sorry doesn't pay the judgment. I'll pay it every month. I promise you'll pay it because the court ordered it, not because you're sorry. Can we ever? Goodbye, Herbert. I walked away. Didn't look back. 5 days later, Alfred called. Herbert lost his job. I see. The auto dealership ran a background check, found the civil judgment, terminated him immediately. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. They're being evicted from Beulah's parents' place, too. Too much drama. Where will they go? Cheap rental in West Phoenix. $900 a month. Rough area. The first payment would be due April 1st. $1,750. On Herbert's new warehouse salary, $16 an hour at Home Depot, it would be nearly impossible. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I heard about the apartment through Alfred, who'd driven by out of curiosity. Bars on the windows, he reported. Cracked stucco, cars on blocks in the parking lot. I didn't ask why he checked. Maybe he needed to see it to know the ending was real. I didn't need to see it. The financial calculation was simple. Herbert earned roughly $33,000 annually now after taxes, maybe $25,000, $2,000 monthly. The judgment payment was $750. That left $250 for everything else. Add their existing debt, $108,000, and bankruptcy became not just likely, but inevitable. Their marriage was fracturing, too. According to mutual acquaintances, Beulah blamed Herbert's weakness. Herbert blamed her greed. They were destroying each other exactly as they had tried to destroy me. The difference was I'd had the law on my side. They had only each other. And that, it turned out, wasn't enough. March 20th, I sat in my living room, my house, my furniture, my peace, and thought about justice. Not the abstract concept they teach in law school, the concrete reality I'd spent 35 years pursuing. Justice wasn't punishment for punishment's sake. It was consequence. Natural, inevitable consequence for choices made freely. Herbert chose to live in my house for 4 years without paying. Beulah chose to plan my death and the theft of my property. Together, they chose exploitation over honesty, greed over gratitude. The law simply made them face what they'd chosen. The debt, the judgment, the garnishment, the bankruptcy, the degraded circumstances, all of it, every dollar, every consequence was theirs. They'd earned it. I turned the page of my book. Outside, the March evening settled into darkness. The desert air carried the scent of creosote and cooling asphalt. My phone sat silent on the table. No blocked calls, no threatening texts, just silence. Finally, the last week of March passed quietly. Then Alfred called with news. They filed for bankruptcy. Chapter 7. It's in the system. I wasn't surprised. With $150,000 in debt and Herbert's warehouse salary, it was inevitable. Alfred forwarded the filing electronically. I scrolled through on my tablet. Case number, court docket, creditor list. Herbert and Beulah's debts itemized with clinical precision. Credit cards, auto loan, personal loans, my judgment. 23 pages of financial ruin made official. What does this mean practically? I asked Alfred. They're broke officially, permanently. Most debt gets erased, but your judgment survives. It's court-ordered restitution. So, they still owe me every penny. $42,000. The bankruptcy just makes it harder for them to hide from it. I filed the document in my growing folder labeled Right Vite. Another piece of evidence that Herbert had chosen his path and walked it to its conclusion. April 8th, an acquaintance mentioned seeing Herbert's Charger on a tow truck. Repossessed. 3 months of missed payments catching up. Alfred confirmed it that afternoon. They're using the bus now, he said. In Phoenix in summer. I imagined Herbert on public transit in 100-degree heat carrying his Home Depot vest. Felt nothing. Just noted the information. Another domino fallen. Through April and early May, Alfred kept me informed. Beulah applied to 17 positions in 3 weeks. No offers. Her resume listed social media consultant and content creator. Nobody took Instagram seriously as work experience. Herbert worked warehouse shifts at $16 per hour. Gross annual $33,000 after taxes, maybe $2,200 monthly. Rent $900. When the garnishment started, $1,750. The math didn't work. They were drowning. May 5th, Alfred called. She left him. Moved back to her parents yesterday. Filed for divorce this morning. Claims he misrepresented his financial situation before marriage. Even now, Beulah was rewriting history, making herself the victim. Herbert was alone now, working 2 jobs, warehouse days, security nights, sleeping 4 hours, eating cheap food, existing without living. This was consequence. This was what stealing from family cost. Mid-May, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Dad. Herbert's voice cracked and desperate. Don't hang up, please. I said nothing. Just listened. I was wrong about everything. The house, Beulah, the money. I destroyed my life. I destroyed us. His voice broke. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me? Long silence. I considered my response carefully. You made your choices, Herbert. Every step, you chose Beulah over me. Greed over integrity. Theft over honesty. Now you live with those choices. But I'm your son. No, you're not. I ended the call, set the phone down, stared at it for a long moment, then went back to my book. I sat for a long time after that call. The house was quiet. No triumph, no vindication, just silence. I'd chosen justice over family, principle over blood. Herbert was alive somewhere in this city, working night shifts, sleeping on a mattress in a studio. I could have helped him, could have forgiven, forgotten, moved on. But that would have meant accepting theft, lies, betrayal. Would have meant teaching him that family means no consequences. I stood, walked to the kitchen, poured bourbon. Outside, the desert sun was setting, painting everything gold and amber. Justice, I thought, doesn't feel like victory. It feels like completion, like closing a book you'll never read again. The bourbon burned going down, warm and final. Tomorrow, I'd wake up, make coffee, read the paper, live my life. The ending was also the beginning. The days after Herbert's call, I focused on what I could control, the house, my house. I hired contractors, chose paint colors, replaced what they damaged or worn. By late May, transformation was underway. The contractors painted every room. Desert sand in the living room, sage green in the bedroom, colors warm but neutral, peaceful, like starting over. They replaced carpets, updated fixtures, changed every lock, new deadbolts, window latches, garage code different. A security company installed cameras at entry points, motion sensors, monitoring service. $2,400 for peace of mind. Mid-June when the work finished I walked through each room, touched walls, tested locks. The house felt lighter, clean, mine again in every sense. Total investment $10,400 worth every penny. Early June I met with my financial advisor. I want to donate $50,000 to charity. I said elder abuse prevention. He suggested several organizations I researched, chose the Arizona Foundation for Elder Justice. They provided legal aid to elderly victims of family exploitation. The donation was anonymous. I didn't want recognition, just wanted my suffering to have purpose. The foundation director called to thank the anonymous donor. I listened without identifying myself, then hung up. Something shifted inside me. The pain meant something. It would protect others. That was enough. Alfred started coming by Tuesdays and Thursdays. We played chess on my patio, drank coffee, sometimes bourbon, talked about books, politics, old cases from the prosecutor's office. Never Herbert, never the lawsuit, just brothers enjoying each other's company. One evening, Alfred moved his bishop and said, "You did the right thing, you know." I did the necessary thing. Same thing. We sat in comfortable silence, watching monsoon clouds build over the mountains. This was family. The family that remained when pretenders were stripped away. July 15th. My bank statement showed a direct deposit. $1,750. Description: wage garnishment. Right. Herbert M. First payment under court order. I stared at the line item. Herbert's paycheck 45% smaller now. A life calculated in deductions. I didn't feel satisfaction. Didn't feel revenge. Just transferred the money to a separate savings account labeled Legal Reserve Fund. The system worked. That was all. Just gears turning, justice automated. August 31st, my 68th birthday. Small gathering on my patio. Alfred, 3 retired prosecutors. 1 old defense attorney who'd become a friend. Steaks grilled, wine poured, stories shared. Raymond, who tried to mediate months ago, asked carefully, "How's Herbert doing these days?" Silence fell around the table. I sat down my bourbon. "I don't have a son." Not angry, not sad, just factual. Raymond nodded. Changed the subject. Later, after guests left, I sat alone. Sunset painted the desert gold and red. 68 years old, 35 years as a prosecutor, 8 years widowed, 0 sons, 1 brother, 1 house, 1 peaceful evening. I thought about the journey. Thanksgiving dinner to August sunset. 9 months of legal warfare. Herbert's life destroyed. My family reduced to its honest core. Some would say I was too harsh. That family should forgive anything. But family isn't just blood. It's trust, respect, integrity. Herbert had none of those. So, he wasn't family. Simple as that. I was 68. I had good years left. I'd spend them with people who valued me, not people who saw me as an asset to exploit. That wasn't cruelty. That was wisdom. The desert night cooled. Stars emerged. Brilliant and distant. I raised my glass to no one in particular, to justice, maybe to boundaries. To the hard truth that some relationships cost more than they're worth. Herbert was out there somewhere in this city, sleeping in a motel, waking for night shifts. I could have forgiven him, could have let it all go, but that would have meant teaching him that family means no accountability. Better he learned the harder lesson. Actions matter. Choices define us, and sometimes love means letting someone fall. I finished my bourbon as the last light faded from the western sky. Justice isn't always sweet, but it's always necessary. I stood, walked inside, locked the door behind me. My house, my life, my peace. Tomorrow would come and I would be ready for it.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.